Chapter 1533. How Tianwang remained silent. King Wuling asked anxiously, "Father, do you have any other concerns?" "One of the reasons I went into seclusion was to attract the imperial family's remnants to attack us so that we could catch them all in one fell swoop. But now, it seems that the imperial family's remnants were not caught in one fell swoop. They must be hiding somewhere and only came out now." How Tianwang's low voice was filled with anger. King Wuling was shocked. This meant that he did not do his job well and left a trail behind. He could not help but have an ugly expression as he said, "I think that the imperial family's remnants came from another world. After all, they escaped when the pregnant empress opened the spatial door. Apart from that, they must have other reinforcements in the realm beyond heaven." How Tianwang said firmly. He was more experienced and saw the flaw. "Why do you say that, father?" King Wuling was puzzled. The divine ability that the woman used was clearly used by one of the imperial family's trusted aides. That woman must be one of their descendants. The only one who escaped from the spatial door was the empress and no one else. Since they came together this time, it means that they have connected. There must be a hidden hideout in the realm beyond heaven. King Wuling's eyes turned as if he had been enlightened. He said with a sudden realization, "Father's words make sense. I will immediately send people to track down this group of remnants." "Remember one thing," Heavenly King Hao said. "You didn't find them before, so that means they must be hiding in a very secluded or unexpected place. We've almost turned the entire outer sky upside down. This time, we'll focus on finding places we haven't been to before. Understood?" King Wuling nodded heavily to show that he understood. Originally, King Wuling was the king of the realm beyond heaven. However, after Hao Tianwang came out of seclusion, his status naturally dropped by a level. There were many things that he had to do personally. Beyond heaven was a world where the strong preyed on the weak. In front of Hao Tianwang, King Wuling quickly changed his role, and did not dare to complain at all. As for the grudge in his heart, no one cared. Hao Tianwang didn't care either, because everything King Wuling had was given to him by him. If King Wuling dared to complain, he would lose everything. King Wuling suppressed the various emotions in his heart. He also had many considerations. His cultivation had yet to reach the great circle of perfection, and he had yet to truly cultivate a divine ability that could suppress the royal family. This was what King Wuling coveted the most. All of this fell on Hao Tianwang. If he didn't serve Hao Tianwang well, all of this would just be a dream. In the space door, on the somersault cloud, Tang Zheng and Xiaobai could remain calm. However, when they recalled the previous battle, they still had lingering fears. Fog and Wild Dog were pale. The two of them still didn't understand what was going on. Where were they? They looked left and right, but it was pitch black. They couldn't see anything. The somersault cloud had already stopped. The surroundings were quiet, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Where are we?" Wild Dog asked, trembling. Fog also asked, "Your Majesty, will Hao Tianwang catch up?" It's impossible for him to catch up even if he wants to." Xiaobai knew the law of space. He knew that it would be futile for Hao Tianwang to chase into the space door, so he wasn't worried. "Don't worry, everyone. We're in the space door. Xiaobai and I will bring you out." Tang Zheng comforted gently. "Space door?" Fog and Wild Dog cried out in shock. They had only heard of the space door before, but they had never personally entered one. They subconsciously looked left and right, as if they wanted to see something, but it was pitch black everywhere. They couldn't see anything. "Xiaobai, let's begin." Tang Zheng didn't want to spend too much time in the space door, so he joined forces with Xiaobai to find the exit. The space door could lead to many worlds. Of course, they couldn't just barge into other worlds. Besides, even if they wanted to, they couldn't find the door, so they couldn't enter. However, Tang Zheng and Xiaobai were very familiar with the space door that led to Sky Beyond. Last time, they needed Xiaobai's guidance. This time, the two of them joined forces and quickly found the space door. A large door suddenly opened. Light shone in from the entrance, attracting the attention of Fog and Wild Dog. They craned their necks and opened their eyes wide, as if they wanted to see something. However, before they could see anything, the somersault cloud whizzed through the space door and returned to Sky Beyond. Sunlight shone down from the sky. For a moment, they couldn't get used to it. Wild Dog half closed his eyes and looked around, as if looking for the space door. However, the space door had quietly closed. There was no trace of it. Where's the space door? Wild Dog asked bitterly. It's closed. Sigh, what a pity. I haven't seen enough yet. I can't see anything. Fog glared at him and said, by the time you see the door, the food will be cold. Wild Dog laughed embarrassedly. Master, you're still the best. If it wasn't for your last sword, we would have been doomed. Xiaobai calmed down and recalled this battle. He gradually understood Hao Tianwang's strength and the gap between them. Of course, he felt that the last sword was very amazing. It was no less than Hao Tianwang's. Tang Zheng was also slightly proud. At that critical moment, he didn't use the Taiji two-form sword technique. Instead, he used his self-created move, Heaven and Earth Fusion. Real knowledge came from practice. This time, he had perfectly verified the power of Heaven and Earth Fusion. One could imagine how excited he was. The sword technique he created was no less than other sword techniques. In fact, it was even better. He had a strong confidence that in the future he would be able to create a complete set of sword techniques, not just a few scattered sword moves. He gritted his teeth and strengthened his belief. Taking a deep breath, he calmed down and said, but I'm still no match for Hao Tianwang. He's really too strong. The others felt the same and fell into silence at the same time. Seeing the depressed mood, Xiaobai said unhappily, he has cultivated for tens of thousands of years. Master, you've only cultivated for a few years. Comparing the two, the difference is obvious. What? You've only cultivated for a few years? This sentence shocked Fog and Wild Dog. They looked at Tang Zheng in disbelief. If this sentence was said by someone else, they would definitely snort in disdain. However, these words came from Little White's mouth, so the credibility of it increased greatly. No one would doubt it. The two of them looked at each other and saw the complicated look in each other's eyes. It was difficult to describe. They only felt that this was a situation that only appeared in myths and legends. What's there to be surprised about? Xiaobai said as if he was used to it. The Fog and Wild Dog both wanted to die. They really wanted to find a hole in the ground and hide in it. This was not worth making a fuss about, as they had cultivated for hundreds and thousands of years, and were far from Tang Zheng's level. Comparing the two, they were so ashamed that they couldn't show their faces. They were extremely weak. Fog originally looked down on Tang Zheng. Now it was even more indescribable. He didn't dare to look at Tang Zheng directly. Chapter 1534. In the Suicide Valley, Tang Zheng and the other three had returned. The few of them had analyzed the situation and decided to return to the Suicide Valley. After all, this time, they had indeed found out that the news that Hao Tianwang was not dead was too explosive. They had to send it back as soon as possible to prevent the ancestor and the others from taking extreme actions and being discovered by the other party. Seeing the triumphant return of the few of them, the ancestor led his subordinates to welcome them. After a round of greetings, when they told the truth, they were all shocked. The news that Hao Tianwang was not dead was like an atomic bomb that exploded in their hearts. Many people's expressions became unnatural. The ancestor's eyes flickered as he scanned the surroundings. He gritted his teeth and said, "What is this reaction of yours? It's good that this traitor is not dead. In the future, we will have a chance to kill this traitor with our own hands. This is the blessing of the imperial family's ancestors." The ancestors' words were enlightening, causing the depressed mood to improve and boosting everyone's morale. Xiaobai knew that he should stand up and not move forward. He stood in front of everyone and said fearlessly, "Hao Tianwang is not dead. There is nothing to be afraid of. In the future, I will personally kill him and pay tribute to the dead ancestors. From then on, we will no longer have to hide in this suicide valley." Xiaobai was the backbone, and his words were no less effective than the ancestors. Everyone's eyes lit up as they looked at him. "Kill the traitor! Kill the traitor!" The Fog cleverly raised his arms and shouted. The others were encouraged and shouted excitedly. The crowd was furious and swept away the depression. Tang Zheng looked at Little White with admiration. He was normal very quickly and already had the characteristics of a leader. In time, he would definitely unify the sky beyond heaven and take revenge for the imperial family, fulfilling his long-cherished wish. A moment later, the ancestor, Tangzheng, Xiaobai and the fog came to a quiet room. There was no one else, and the atmosphere became heavy again. Previously, it was necessary to boost the morale, but now it was time to discuss countermeasures. This was very heavy. Your Majesty, Hao Tianwang has a special ability to suppress the royal family. Do we have a countermeasure? The elder ancestor asked earnestly. This was what he was most worried about. Hao Tianwang had actually created such a heaven-defying ability. He was simply the bane of the royal family. He couldn't help but worry. Of course, he glanced at Tangzheng from time to time. The fog had already reported the battle situation to him in detail, especially the last sword attack from Tangzheng, which could be said to be a miracle. Although the old ancestor did not see it with his own eyes, his heart swayed and fluctuated. Xiaobai lowered his head in shame and said, "Ancestor, I don't have a way for now." No way? The elder ancestor's heart skipped a beat. Hearing this from His Majesty was no different from being struck by lightning. However, the elder ancestor was used to seeing storms and waves, so he quickly calmed down and said, "No one can compare to the royal family's ability. How could that traitor suppress them so easily? There must be another way, but His Majesty hasn't thought of it yet." The fog had heard all kinds of stories about the royal family since he was young, so he was very confident in the royal family. He nodded heavily and agreed, "That's for sure. His Majesty will definitely think of a good way." Xiaobai was even more ashamed when he heard this. Although he had inherited the memories of the royal family, he did not completely inherit the royal family's ability. Xiaobai resentfully said, "I also don't know what to do." After pausing for a moment, his gaze fell on Tangzheng and he said with expectation, "Master, your sword forced that traitor to retreat. Perhaps you have a way, right?" Now he could only pin his hopes on Tangzheng. Among everyone, he was the only one who could go against Hao Tianwang. Tangzheng's face sank, and he shook his head and said, "My cultivation base is too far away from Hao Tianwang's. I was only lucky to be able to use the heaven and earth integration move this time. I might not succeed next time. Besides, I don't know if he has another move." He did not continue, but the meaning of his words could not be more obvious. He was not confident either. The few people's faces became particularly solemn, and a few dark clouds seemed to crawl on their foreheads. The elder ancestor thought for a long time and finally said, "Hao Tianwang's cultivation base is indeed very powerful. I think he's already at the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm. We're not his match now, but it doesn't mean that we won't be in the future. Therefore, it's imperative to improve His Majesty's cultivation base." It's easier said than done to improve his cultivation base in a hurry. Xiaobai smiled bitterly. The elder ancestor's eyes became deep, and he said mysteriously, "Others might not be able to do it, but the imperial family has the ability to create miracles." Xiaobai heard the implied meaning and looked at the elder ancestor curiously. The others were not fools, and they looked at the elder ancestor at the same time. The elder ancestor no longer mystified and revealed the answer. When the late emperor was heavily injured back then, he already expected the imperial family's great calamity to come, so he left a backup plan for his descendants. A backup plan? Xiaobai exclaimed. It was obvious that it was the first time Miwu heard about this. He looked at the elder ancestor in disbelief. Yes, a backup plan. The late emperor once said that only the imperial family's descendants can open this secret. What's going on? Xiaobai asked impatiently. The heavenly palace. The elder ancestor reached out, and a ball of light burst out from his huge palm. It was dazzling and eye-catching. The heavenly palace? What's that? Everyone looked at his palm in surprise. The light faded away, and a small palace appeared in the elder ancestor's palm. It looked like a small model, and was very unique. The elder ancestor said, "This is the heavenly palace." What's the use of the heavenly palace? It's very useful. The elder ancestor said mysteriously. Didn't I just say it? If you want to quickly increase your cultivation, then you must use the heavenly palace. It's just that the heavenly palace can only be opened by the imperial family, and only the imperial family can enter it. Outsiders can't do anything about it. With just a few words, everyone had a certain understanding. Miwu couldn't help but say in disappointment, "So the heavenly palace is useless to others?" Of course, it's precisely because of this point that the imperial family hasn't returned all these years, and I haven't taken out the heavenly palace. This is because the heavenly palace is useless to us. The elder ancestor's words were filled with helplessness and disappointment. This was because he knew the heavenly palace's function the best, so he couldn't help but feel regret after losing this opportunity. You said that the heavenly palace can quickly increase one's cultivation. Then how do we do it? Xiaobai asked. The elder ancestor grinned and said, "The heavenly palace has its own universe, and time is completely different from the outside world. It has two different rules. One day outside is 1 year, 10 years, or even 100 years inside." What one day outside is 1 year, 10 years, or even 100 years inside? Elder ancestor, are you sure this isn't a joke? Xiaobai was shocked, and his eyes were wide open with disbelief. The others were similar. This theory was unheard of, and for a moment, no one believed it. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1535. Everyone was skeptical, thinking that this was a fantasy story. Is almost equal to the old ancestor didn't mind and understood their reactions. He calmly said, "I understand that you don't understand the details and have such doubts. But I want to say that this is absolutely true and I'm not exaggerating. Moreover, I don't dare to lie in front of His Majesty." "Then tell us more details," Xiaobai urged. If all of this was true, he knew very well what it meant. Others spent 10 years to cultivate, but in the Universal Palace, they only needed 10 days, 1 day, or even less. What kind of concept was this? This was a huge cheat. How could others compare to him? Even Tangzheng couldn't remain calm. He knew the significance of this. The old ancestor continued to speak. The Universal Palace was passed down from generation to generation by the imperial family's ancestors. It was unknown who had refined such a miraculous treasure. However, every member of the imperial family would cultivate in the Universal Palace from a young age. This way, their cultivation speed would increase greatly, and others would not be able to compare. The imperial family's position could be stabilized forever. This was because the imperial family didn't need to worry about a lack of successors. Even a mediocre person could become an expert with the Universal Palace. The Universal Palace could make the saying, "Diligence makes up for stupidity," very simple. Moreover, there was a restriction on the Universal Palace. Only the imperial family could enter to cultivate. Others couldn't. Even if they obtained the Universal Palace, they could only stare at it. Where could they find such a treasure? Only a few people knew about the existence of the Universal Palace. Back then, the old ancestor was one of the protectors and naturally knew about this. Moreover, when the late emperor entrusted the Universal Palace to him before his death, he had also told him earnestly. That was why he knew the Universal Palace like the back of his hand. After hearing this, everyone looked at Xiaobai with envy. This was truly a great opportunity. This is an era of relying on one's father. Tangzheng couldn't help but joke. However, he was sincerely happy for Xiaobai in his heart. Upon hearing this, Xiaobai looked at Tangzheng. He already believed the patriarch's words, so he said, "Master, come with me into the Universal Palace." Tangzheng felt warmth in his heart. He smiled and refused. "Didn't you hear what the patriarch said? Only members of the royal family could enter, and no one else could. Therefore, you can go in and cultivate with peace of mind." The patriarch also advised, "Your Majesty, this isn't a child's play. Furthermore, it's not like you can just enter the heavenly palace." Back then, the late emperor had also tried to let others enter the heavenly palace, but he didn't succeed. Therefore, only the royal family can enter. The old ancestor's words were resolute and unquestionable. "No." Xiaobai firmly shook his head and looked at Tangzheng with a burning gaze. "If Master doesn't go in, I won't go in either." The old ancestor was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Xiaobai to be so stubborn. Xiaobai's expression was firm, as if he had steeled his heart and would not waver at all. Tang Zheng's expression turned serious as he said solemnly, Xiaobai, don't mess around. This is a good thing. And I'm sincerely happy for you. You can enter the heavenly palace alone. And I'm still hoping that you can help me after your cultivation has greatly increased. Xiaobai drooped his head and said, Master, but I also want to go with you. We haven't even tried yet, so how can we say that it's a failure? Tang Zheng bitterly smiled and shook his head. The old ancestor also earnestly advised, Your Majesty, this is something that countless members of the royal family have tried before. However, other than the royal family, no one else has been able to enter the heavenly palace without exception. Xiaobai bit his lips and stubbornly said, It wasn't possible in the past, but that doesn't mean it won't be possible now, and it won't be possible in the future. The world changes, so who can say for sure? The old ancestor sighed inwardly. He was filled with emotions towards the relationship between the two, but he was also helpless. His Majesty is young and full of vigor. He won't cry until he sees the coffin. Fine, then let him try it. He'll know that my words are true and that I have no intention of deceiving him. Thus the old ancestor's tone changed and said, Since His Majesty is so insistent, then let's try it once. Who knows, we might really be able to create a miracle. Even he himself didn't believe these words, thinking that it was all nonsense. If Xiaobai wasn't His Majesty, he definitely wouldn't mess around like this. It was a complete waste of time. Tang Zheng helplessly shook his head and bitterly smiled. Xiaobai, why do you have to do this? How will we know the answer if we don't try? Then let's try it. He shrugged and compromised, treating it as a way to cross the hurdle in Xiaobai's heart. Fog rolled her eyes and glanced sideways at Tang Zheng. Although she admitted that he had extraordinary abilities, she couldn't help but criticize him in her heart. He was overestimating himself and making a fool of himself. Xiaobai excitedly widened his eyes and urged, Old ancestor, how do we start? Your Majesty, drip your blood on the heavenly palace and then circulate your divine power. Everything will fall into place, and you'll be able to enter the heavenly palace. The old ancestor pretended to be calm, but the excitement in his words was obvious. That simple? Xiaobai asked in disbelief. It's simple for His Majesty, but it's harder than ascending to heaven for others. The old ancestor sighed with emotion. Indeed, it was not easy to obtain the blood of the imperial family. Moreover, the imperial family had to circulate their own power. This was something that no one could replace. Both were indispensable. Xiaobai let Tang Zheng stand beside him and extended a finger. A drop of blood flew out from his fingertip and landed on the heavenly palace. Instantly, the heavenly palace shone brightly and slowly flew from the old ancestor's palm. Wow! The others opened their mouths in surprise as they watched this miraculous scene. Xiaobai concentrated and circulated his power. The blood completely merged with the heavenly palace. A red light shot out from the heavenly palace and landed on Xiaobai's body. The red light was restrained and did not spread outwards. It completely enveloped Xiaobai's body. The old ancestor nodded in relief. This scene was very familiar. It had been many years since he last saw it. It reminded him of his past and made him sigh. Suddenly, the red light fluctuated and moved to the side, moving to Tang Zheng's body. What's going on? The veins on the old ancestor's forehead throbbed, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He didn't even blink as he stared at Tang Zheng. He knew very well that once he was enveloped by the red light, it was very likely that he would enter the heavenly palace. This was what the late emperor had told him. However, the red light was immune to others and did not land on others. This scene was completely different. Tang Zheng quietly stood beside Little White, and the red light took the initiative to fall on his body. Did this mean anything? The old ancestor's heartstrings could not help but tighten. The fog did not know what was going on. There was still a playful expression on his face. After a while, the red light completely enveloped Tang Zheng's body. He was no different from Xiaobai. At this time, the fog gradually realized something. He turned his head to look at the old ancestor, and found that his expression had become very complicated. It was even more complicated than seeing a ghost. The red light enveloped Xiaobai and Tang Zheng without any difference. Chapter 1536. Tang Zheng and Little White disappeared into thin air, and the heavenly palace that was shining with boundless light also disappeared, falling back into the ancestor's palm. Miwu hurriedly came over and asked anxiously, "Ancestor, where is that person?" She was naturally referring to Tang Zheng. The ancestor understood her question, and his expression became unnatural. He stammered. He also entered the universal palace. Ah! Miwu screamed. Although she had already guessed this point, the shock in her heart was indescribable when she heard the confirmation from the ancestor. How can this be? How did he go in? Didn't you say only the imperial family can enter? The ancestor nodded resentfully. Indeed, only the imperial family can enter. But why did he go in? Miwu asked. Could he be a member of the imperial family? Of course not. The ancestor refuted without thinking, but he couldn't give a reason. He could only say with a pained expression, "I don't know the exact reason. I can only ask them when they come out." Miwu's chest heaved up and down. She was so angry that she couldn't say anything. After a while, she had to admit this fact and asked unwillingly, "Then when will they come out?" "They will naturally come out after they have made some progress in their cultivation," the ancestor said helplessly. This was indeed not something he could control. Inside the universal palace, Tang Zheng and Xiaobai saw a light flash in front of their eyes. They had changed places and entered a luxurious palace. Xiaobai was startled at first, but then he cheered and almost jumped up. "Master, you've entered the universal palace. You've succeeded, you've really succeeded." Tang Zheng also felt that it was inconceivable. He had never thought that he would succeed. He only wanted to make Xiaobai give up on the obsession in his heart. That was why he did this with him. He never thought that the pretense would actually become reality. He looked at himself and then looked at Xiaobai. He really couldn't understand how he could appear in the universal palace. He didn't think that the ancestor was lying and deliberately deceiving him. In the past, no one other than the royal family had ever entered the heavenly palace, which was why there was such a rule. "Ha ha ha, I knew that master would create miracles. Sure enough, I was right. I'm really a genius," Xiaobai said complacently. "Xiaobai, this isn't necessarily a miracle created by me. Maybe it's a miracle created by you," Tang Zheng corrected. "Myself? How is that possible?" "It's not impossible. Only the imperial family can open the universal palace, so the possibility of you creating a miracle is greater." Xiaobai thought for a while and shook his head. "No, I think it was you who created the miracle, master." Tang Zheng smiled bitterly. There was no answer to this question, and there was no need to keep arguing. Since he was lucky enough to enter the universal palace, he couldn't miss out on this heaven-sent opportunity. "Xiaobai, do you feel a problem with the passage of time?" Tang Zheng changed the topic. Xiaobai's expression became serious. He looked around and said, "I don't." Tang Zheng's perception of time wasn't particularly accurate, but he had a way. He quickly reached out his hand and looked at his watch. This was the watch his grandfather gave him. Although it wasn't worth much, it had a special meaning to him. So he always carried it with him and carefully cared for it. Even now, it could still be used normally. However, something strange happened. Why did the watch stop? Xiaobai asked in bewilderment. Tang Zheng stared at the watch as if there was a flower on it, firmly attracting his gaze. Suddenly, Tang Zheng looked up as if he had discovered a new continent. He shouted, "No, it's not that time has stopped, but it's slowed down." "Slowed down?" Xiaobai was confused as he stared at the watch. His and Tang Zheng's eyes were sharper than an eagle's. Once they focused, they immediately found clues. This watch has indeed slowed down. Moreover, it has become incomparably slow. It's as if it's not moving at all. Tang Zheng nodded. "Your judgment is very accurate. This is the truth." It seems that the ancestor was right. The time in the universal palace is indeed different from the outside world. However, he was wrong about one thing. A day outside is not a year, 10 years, or 100 years inside. It's just that the time here has become incomparably slow. Ah, so that's how it is. Xiaobai suddenly understood, but he still had a stomach full of questions. Then why did it become like this? Tang Zheng thought for a while and said, The universal palace is equivalent to another space. The laws of time in our space are not the same as here. That's why the time is different. It's precisely because of this that we can do many things in the universal palace in a day outside, such as cultivating. This is really too magical. Xiaobai's eyes became brighter and brighter. However, why did the ancestor say that the time in the universal palace varies from person to person? Tang Zheng naturally remembered the ancestor's words. For example, the time in the outside world was different for the time in the universal palace. Some people had a longer time, while others had a shorter time. Tang Zheng was temporarily unable to figure out the mystery behind this. Seeing Tang Zheng ponder for a long time, he shook his head regretfully. Xiaobai let out a long sigh, embarrassed in his heart. Let's not think about this. Let's seize the time to cultivate. This is the most important thing. Tang Zheng could not hold back his excitement and said, "All right, let's begin." The two of them sat down cross-legged. Xiaobai's body flashed, and he transformed into his true body. Cultivating with his true body was naturally the fastest. A ball of fire swam around his body. At the same time, blood veins also swam around his body. The blood light actually penetrated his thick hair and appeared on the outside like blood vessels. It was extremely magical. This was the effect of the bloodthirsty scepter. The ancestor was right. Although the bloodthirsty scepter was powerful and had boundless power, it would still affect its owner. Xiaobai had used the bloodthirsty scepter repeatedly in battle. He had formed a bloodline connection with the bloodthirsty scepter, so his body was unavoidably affected. However, after all, it had only been a short time, so the effect was still very limited. Tang Zheng's mind settled down. He first activated the Heavenly Book. The ancient passage scroll and the Heavenly Book were of the same origin. They were Tang Zheng's foundation, so he had always been cultivating this divine ability. Therefore, with this opportunity, he chose to cultivate the Heavenly Book first. In his mind, the Heavenly Book that was flashing with light slowly unfolded page by page. The divine abilities that he had already comprehended began to circulate on their own, while the divine abilities that he had yet to comprehend were like balls of fog, waiting for Tang Zheng to push aside the clouds and see their true essence. Tang Zheng was immersed. At first, he did not comprehend any new profundities. However, as time passed and he studied the Heavenly Book again and again, the profundities gradually appeared. However, he did not realize that time was passing slower and slower. Especially after he comprehended the new profundities of the Heavenly Book, time seemed to have stopped. Everything came to a standstill. It was unimaginably slow. On the other hand, Xiaobai did not experience such a phenomenon. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1537. The completely different reactions of Tang Zheng and Xiaobai meant that the two patriarchs were right. Everyone would have different encounters in the Heavenly Palace. The cultivation progress of the two would also be completely different. The mysteries of the Heavenly Book appeared bit by bit, and a huge vortex appeared above his head. As if he was enlightened, the spirit energy in the Heavenly Palace quickly gathered from the vortex to Tang Zheng's brain. There was also the spirit energy of heaven and earth in the Heavenly Palace, which allowed cultivators to cultivate normally. On the other hand, although Xiaobai also had the spirit energy of heaven and earth continuously entering his body, it was not as spectacular as Tang Zheng's. His true qi surged upward with a whoosh. Boom. He crossed a hurdle. Boom. Another hurdle had been crossed. His vital energy rose steadily. Compared to the outside world, a year had passed. Tang Zheng was very clear about that. He was already on the verge of a breakthrough. The words on the Heavenly Book flickered with light. The words seemed to have magical power, and they were deeply imprinted into Tang Zheng's brain. Everything came naturally. His cultivation level went up another level, and he broke through to the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm. His eyes suddenly opened, and the light in his eyes flickered. It seemed to contain endless mysteries. The Heavenly Book is indeed extraordinary. No wonder Yan Qingyi became so powerful. He turned his head to look at Xiaobai. His huge body was quiet, and there was no movement at all. It was obvious that he was still cultivating. I wonder how fast Xiaobai's time is passing. He shook his head. He did not know the answer, but he had enough understanding of his time. Although it was equivalent to cultivating for a year, only half a day had passed. Perhaps compared to his previous cultivation speed, it was very slow for him to cultivate for a year to break through one level. However, that was in the past. He was now in the Mahayana realm. Moreover, the higher the cultivation level, the harder it was to break through one level. It could be seen from Hao Tianwang's seclusion. He had been in seclusion for more than 10,000 years, and his cultivation level had not broken through much. He had only broken through one level, which was from the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm to the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm. Compared to Hao Tianwang, Tang Zheng's speed was already like a rocket. In fact, cultivation was like this. The further one progressed, the more difficult it became. Many people were stuck at a certain threshold their entire lives, unable to take another step forward. He took a deep breath. He was well aware of this point, so he felt very fortunate. The energy transformed by the heavenly book surged through his meridians and merged with his genuine qi. His genuine qi was originally composed of many kinds of energy. Other than the heavenly book, there was also the Ksitigarbha Sutra. The power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra was suppressed. The two opposing forces originally maintained a balance. Now that this balance was broken, the power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra was in danger. Tang Zheng had already realized this. This was a very dangerous sign. It was impossible for him to give up on both the Ksitigarbha Sutra and the heavenly tomes. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, I can't let the heavenly tomes dominate. I'll cultivate the Ksitigarbha Sutra next. As he chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, Sanskrit words flew out of his mouth and attached themselves to his body bit by bit. Not long after, they completely formed a kasaya. The kasaya shone with golden light and enveloped him, making him look very dignified. Time passed. Suddenly, a golden spot of light flew out of the golden kasaya. This spot of light was very dazzling, completely covering the golden kasaya. It was sparkling like a bright star that was slowly rising. Tang Zheng seemed to have understood something. He slowly opened his eyes, his gaze firmly fixed on this golden spot of light. The golden spot of light flew to the top of Tang Zheng's head and suddenly stopped. Tang Zheng didn't know what would happen, but he had a feeling that something would happen. This was like a layer of window paper. Before he pierced through it, he would always be looking at the flowers in the fog. He didn't stop chanting the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Over and over again, the power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra increased bit by bit. His cultivation level was rapidly increasing, and his genuine qi was rising steadily. Suddenly, the golden spot of light fell rapidly again. Like a meteor, it fell heavily on the top of Tang Zheng's head. A heavy feeling of power pressed down on the top of his head as if his neck was about to break, but this pressure quickly disappeared. He suddenly found that there was an additional golden spot of light on his scalp. The light of the spot of light gradually converged and was blocked by his head, making it difficult for others to notice. However, Tang Zheng knew very well what this spot of light meant. When the spot of light fell on his scalp, his genuine qi was like a stormy sea, violently slapping his meridians. His genuine qi rose steadily and broke through the shackles again, causing his cultivation to reach the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm in one fell swoop. A golden light flashed in his eyes. He let out a long breath and stopped chanting the Ksitigarbha Sutra. However, the light of the golden kasaya took a long time to fade away, and then the kasaya disappeared. However, the spot of light on his scalp still existed. It was like a scar that was deeply imprinted on his scalp and couldn't be erased. This spot of light is something new. Although I've cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra for so long in the past, I've never seen such a scene. Li Xiaotian also cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra, but he didn't have such an opportunity for the time being. As for whether the Dizong of Goguryeo had such an opportunity, I don't know. If there's a chance next time, I'll definitely ask him. However, there was no doubt that this spot of light was a good thing. It was just a spot of light that allowed his cultivation to rise to another level. This was from the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm to the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm. It was more difficult than breaking through to the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm previously, and the degree of difficulty was unimaginable. However, he broke through so easily. If there were a few more spots of light, then wouldn't my cultivation level soar rapidly? Nevertheless, he knew very well that this was his wishful thinking. First, he didn't know when he would touch this spot of light, so there was no way to predict it. Well, I must not be greedy. This harvest is already rare and valuable. He secretly warned himself. His divine sense sank into his body. The only remaining main vein had already expanded several times. It was like a wide river, and true chi was flowing majestically within it. When his divine sense entered the purple mansion, he couldn't help but be shocked. Yuanying had undergone earth-shaking changes. It was actually moving its body. It was really like a baby that couldn't bear the loneliness and wanted to jump around. It was even eager to try, wanting to jump out of his body. What's going on? Last time, he found that Yuanying was alive and its eyeballs could move. It was very spiritual. However, this time, Yuanying could move its body. This change made him even more shocked. Last time, he tried to communicate with Yuanying to no avail. Could it communicate normally this time? Chapter 1538. Yuanying, can you hear my voice? Tang Zheng tried to ask. Yuanying seemed to have heard his voice. Her eyes widened as she looked up. Her clear eyes were like a clear spring, extremely cute. Sigh, she still can't speak. Tang Zheng sighed. This way, there was no way to communicate with Yuanying. He stared at Yuanying for a long time, but he still couldn't find any clues. He had to give up for the time being. Yuanying was magical. He didn't have any experience and couldn't explain it one by one. He could only wait for Xiaobai to wake up, or go out to ask the old ancestor. After all, he was an expert who had cultivated to the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm. Almost no one he knew could compare to him. I've already reached the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm. Should I continue to cultivate? Tang Zheng pondered. He couldn't miss this opportunity. When he was about to circulate his power, he found a problem that almost scared him. Why is there so much pure yang energy? He was shocked as he stared at the pure yang energy in his body. The pure yang energy was originally very peaceful. Because there was a large amount of pure yin energy, it was almost suppressed. But at this moment, the pure yang energy had increased too much. This balance was completely broken, and the pure yang energy became restless. If he continued, it was very likely that the pure yang energy would explode. He wasn't by the side of his beloved woman. If the pure yang energy exploded, it was equivalent to losing his life. He didn't dare to continue cultivating. Boom! A loud sound came from his body. Unknowingly, the dragon god art was circulating. His dragon seal emitted a burst of bright golden light. Whoosh! The golden light enveloped his body and turned into dragon scales. It was as if he was wearing a dragon scale armor. He looked mighty. Roar! The dragon's roar broke through the air. He looked up to the sky and roared. With a shake of his body, he transformed into a true dragon. His huge body was comparable to Xiaobai. Shaking its dragon head and tail, it began to fly in the Universal Palace, circling the roof and dancing non-stop. Tang Zheng's consciousness was very clear that all of these changes were completed automatically. There was no control of his consciousness at all. In the dark, he realized that his cultivation breakthrough was so fast that it caused the changes in the Dragon God art. His cultivation of the Dragon God art had already reached the 9th level, and he had already ascended to the 9th floor. He had even fused with a set of dragon bones on the 9th floor, thus obtaining a true dragon's body. What exactly were the remaining 9 floors of Langya Pavilion? He didn't know, and neither did Xiaobai. Moreover, Xiaobai had already gone to look for the dragon race's habitat, and then look for the Dragon King. Perhaps the Dragon King would know the answer to all of this. The changes in the Dragon God technique seemed to have given him hope. Could it be that he actually had the opportunity to ascend to the remaining 9 floors of the Langya Pavilion? The power of the Dragon God art rose rapidly. It had already reached its peak, but it still didn't stop. Tang Zheng didn't deliberately control it. His power was like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins. The 9-clawed little golden dragon in the dragon seal gradually changed. 2 golden lights gathered on the little golden dragon's head. After a long time, the light dissipated, and 2 small horns appeared on the little golden dragon's head. Dragon horns. Tang Zheng immediately recognized that these were the legendary dragon horns. It wasn't a single horn, but 2 dragon horns. Although they only protruded a little from the top of his head, they were still dragon horns. "Ah, why does my head hurt?" Suddenly, he screamed and subconsciously covered the top of his head with his dragon claws. However, 2 golden lights rushed out from the top of his head and broke through his skin. A tearing pain penetrated deep into his bone marrow. "It really hurts." Tang Zheng gnashed his teeth, but he didn't struggle anymore. Instead, he let the pain spread to every cell. He had already realized that these were the dragon horns growing. The little golden dragon in the dragon seal was a miniature version of his true body. Any changes in the little golden dragon would appear on his true body. The little golden dragon already had 2 dragon horns, so his true body would also grow dragon horns. The tearing pain continued, but he clearly felt something break free from his skin and emerge little by little. He took a deep breath and endured the pain. He concentrated, not allowing the slightest bit of negligence. Unknowingly, the pain gradually disappeared. A golden light flickered on top of his head, and a mysterious aura rippled out. Xiaobai suddenly opened his eyes and just happened to see this scene. His eyes widened in surprise and he asked in alarm, "Master, what happened to you?" Phew. Tang Zheng let out a heavy breath. His gaze fell on Xiaobai's body. He couldn't help but smile and said comfortingly, "Xiaobai, don't worry, I'm fine." Xiaobai let out a sigh of relief and said, "It's good that you're fine. It's just that, Master, there seems to be a big change on top of your head." Tang Zheng stretched out his dragon claw and gently touched it. 2 dragon horns grew on top of his head. They weren't long, just like the tip of a small lotus. But even if the 2 dragon horns hadn't fully grown yet, it still added a lot of dragon's might to him, making his aura even more vigorous. "These are dragon horns." Tang Zheng knew what Xiaobai was referring to, so he explained. "Dragon horns." Tang Zheng raised his eyelids and glanced at the horn on top of his head. It was a horn unique to the royal family. These dragon horns might be the same as his horn, a unique characteristic of their respective race. "What's the use of these dragon horns?" Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "I'm not sure yet, but I'll know in the future." Originally, Tang Zheng thought that the changes in the dragon god art would allow him to find the secrets of the remaining 9 floors of the Langya Pavilion. But in the end, only a pair of dragon horns grew out and didn't fulfill his wish. Even so, he wasn't discouraged. After all, this was not a small gain. The power of the dragon god art had already calmed down. Other than the abnormal agitation of the pure yang energy, there were no other abnormalities. This time, it could be said that he had gained a lot. His cultivation had risen to the 6th grade of the Mahayana realm, and he had grown dragon horns. He looked at Xiaobai with a burning gaze. The other party's aura had also undergone a tremendous change. He subconsciously asked, "Xiaobai, your cultivation seems to have improved a lot." When Xiaobai heard this, he was overjoyed. He couldn't hold back his joy and nodded impatiently, saying, "Master, my harvest is too great." The ancestor was right. 1 day outside of the heavenly palace is equivalent to a year inside. Just now, it was equivalent to me cultivating for a year. My cultivation has soared and now I've touched the threshold of the 5th grade of the Mahayana realm. 5th grade of the Mahayana realm? Tang Zheng said in surprise. It turned out that there was only a line between Xiaobai and Tang Zheng's cultivation, which was the 3rd grade of the Mahayana realm. Now that he had reached the threshold of the 5th grade of the Mahayana realm, he was just 1 step away. He believed that it wouldn't be long before Xiaobai pierced through this layer of window paper and reached the 5th grade of the Mahayana realm. Xiaobai's cultivation had increased by 1 level, while Tang Zheng's cultivation had increased by 2 levels. Moreover, Tang Zheng's time was equivalent to 2 years, which was twice as long as Xiaobai's. This meant that the heavenly palace, which was prepared for the imperial family, was actually more helpful to Tang Zheng. Chapter 1539. When Xiaobai heard that Tang Zheng had actually broken through 2 levels of cultivation in one go, and that 2 years had passed, he was not jealous. Instead, he cheered and was sincerely happy for him. It was as if he was happier and prouder than his achievements. Master, I knew you could do it. That traitor is only at the 9th stage of the Mahayana stage. And you are only 5 levels away from him. I believe that in the near future, you will definitely be able to surpass him. When that time comes, let's see how arrogant he is. Xiaobai couldn't help but say. It seems like there is only a difference of 3 levels, but it is actually a chasm. Many people are unable to cross this chasm in their entire lives. Tang Zheng was not as optimistic as Xiaobai, because he knew how difficult this task was. Xiaobai believed in Tang Zheng, and said disapprovingly, "It is impossible for others, but I believe that Master can. Isn't there only a difference of 5 levels in your cultivation? Maybe you can catch up from behind and surpass Hao Tianwang before me." Tang Zheng encouraged. Xiaobai nodded heavily. "I will definitely work hard." Tang Zheng could not continue to cultivate in the heavenly palace, as he was worried that the pure yang energy would truly erupt. Xiaobai's harvest was not small, so he had to consolidate his cultivation first. Thus, they left the heavenly palace together. The scene in front of them changed and they returned to the Suicide Valley once again. The fog had been guarding the heavenly palace the entire time, and when she suddenly saw 2 figures appear in front of her, she couldn't help but be shocked and almost cried out in alarm. When she saw the 2 of them clearly, she patted her chest with lingering fear and said, "Your Majesty, so it's you guys who are back. Why are you so fast?" It had only been a day, and he thought that they would be gone for a long time, so he only left the fog to guard the heavenly palace. "Not long for you, but for us a lot of time has passed." Xiaobai smiled slightly, and he also transformed into his human form. The fog seemed to be deep in thought. She suppressed the doubts in her heart and impatiently said, "I will go and invite the ancestor. He will definitely be very happy to know that your Majesty has returned." After saying that, she glanced at Tang Zheng with mixed feelings. Xiaobai entering the heavenly palace was a matter of course, but Tang Zheng actually followed him in. This was equivalent to Tang Zheng beating everyone else. Naturally, they did not feel good in their hearts. Not long after, the ancestor hurriedly entered the room. The heavenly palace was an extremely confidential matter. Other than the few people involved at that time, no one else knew about it. Therefore, only the ancestor and the fog widened their eyes and stared at them. It had only been a day since they last saw each other, but Tang Zheng was keenly aware that the ancestor's body had changed quite a bit. If it was in the past, he definitely wouldn't have noticed, but now that he was at the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm, his eyes could see through many things. Before he could ask, the ancestor spoke first. "Your Majesty, you're finally back. What did you find?" When this question was raised, the ancestor's heart also became anxious. He was both looking forward to it and worried that Xiaobai would not gain anything. This was a contradictory mentality. "Ancestor, my harvest is not small. I'm now almost at the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm." "5th stage of the Mahayana realm?" The ancestor cheered. This meant that Xiaobai's strength had surpassed his. He was also at the 4th stage of the Mahayana realm, but he had not touched the threshold of the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm. His cultivation had been imprisoned in this realm for so many years, and there was no way for him to cross this threshold. With the blessing of the late emperor, your Majesty's cultivation has improved so quickly. This is the fortune of the imperial family and us. The day of taking back the outland is just around the corner. The ancestor was almost in tears as he lamented with mixed feelings. Xiaobai was worried and said empathetically, "Ancestor, don't worry, I'll work harder to cultivate." Naturally, Fog's face also showed a happy expression. She glanced at Tang Zheng and curled her lips. Originally, her bad impression of Tang Zheng had been reduced, but Tang Zheng and Xiaobai entered the Universal Palace together, which made Fog quite unhappy. She thought that Tang Zheng took advantage of Xiaobai. What's the use of him taking advantage? The Universal Palace is used by the imperial family, and he's just an outsider. Even if he entered by chance, it's impossible for him to gain anything. Fog criticized silently. She had an idea and deliberately said sarcastically, "Your Majesty's cultivation speed is naturally unmatched, unlike some people who took advantage of a huge advantage and entered the Universal Palace. In the end, they definitely didn't gain anything at all, so they didn't even dare to say anything." There was no doubt that her words were directed at Tang Zheng. Even a deaf person could hear it. Fog, you're wrong. Xiao Bai quickly defended his master's dignity. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, was calm and collected. Fog stared at Tang Zheng with burning eyes. Looking at his reaction, she thought that he was ashamed and dared not say anything. Your Majesty, you don't have to put in a good word for someone. We all know the function of the Universal Palace. How could an outsider gain anything from it? It can only be considered as gaining some knowledge. This is already a great benefit. The Fog did not catch the hidden meaning in Little White's words. Instead, he thought that Little White was protecting him. Tang Zheng could not help but laugh. He had somewhat guessed Fog's thoughts. Regarding the fact that he could enter the Universal Palace, the ancestor and Fog probably had a lot to say about it. Fog, you're really wrong. Do you know how much Master's cultivation increased in the Universal Palace? Xiao Bai was so angry that he looked like he would not give up until he cleared Tang Zheng's name. His cultivation increased? Fog was shocked, but she immediately calmed down and said indifferently, how much can his cultivation increase? I'm afraid it's just a little bit of true qi. Xiao Bai could not help but roll his eyes. He was speechless. After a while he said, Fog, you really have a problem with your eyesight. Master's cultivation increased by 2 levels. He's now at the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm. He's the one with the highest cultivation among us. What? Increased by 2 levels? 6th stage of the Mahayana realm? Fog was stunned for a moment, thinking that she had misheard. After confirming that she did not hear wrongly, she screamed in shock as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. The ancestor's eyelids twitched violently a few times. His eyesight was more experienced than Fog's. Moreover, he was once at the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm, so he had a lot of experience. Therefore, when Xiao Bai refuted Fog again and again, the ancestor focused and carefully observed Tang Zheng. Suddenly, his pupils shrunk as he really saw some clues. Tang Zheng's aura had indeed changed tremendously compared to before he entered the Universal Palace. Unfortunately, all of his attention was on Xiao Bai, so he had overlooked it. How is this possible? You're more successful than His Majesty? His Majesty is a member of the imperial family, and you're an outsider. The ancestor widened his eyes as if he was possessed. His reaction was even greater than Fog's as he muttered to himself. Tang Zheng's performance could be said to be shocking. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1540. Xiao Bai was very satisfied with the reaction of the ancestor and the Fog. He said with pride, Now you know how powerful Master is, right? Compared to Master, I am still 108,000 miles away. Not only that, it was equivalent to me spending a year in the Heavenly Palace, while it was equivalent to Master spending 2 years. Therefore, his situation in the Heavenly Palace completely exceeded mine. Xiao Bai worked hard to push Tang Zheng to a high position, causing the ancestor and the Fog to feel as if their hearts had suffered a heavy blow. Unable to calm down for a long time, Tang Zheng was a little embarrassed and modestly waved his hand. Xiao Bai, you are exaggerating. I am telling the truth. They don't believe in Master, so I am telling them. Xiao Bai proudly raised his head. Now you know how powerful Master is, right? From now on, don't look down on Master. Master is more powerful than us. Therefore, in the future, if there is anyone who can defeat that traitor Hao Tianwang, Master is the most likely. The ancestor was speechless. The truth was right in front of him. It seemed that he had to re-evaluate Tang Zheng's strength and position. Bewildering Mist heavily snorted as she could not continue to taunt Tang Zheng. She pouted her lips in grievance and swallowed all the words she wanted to say back into her stomach. Tang Zheng did not want to continue this topic and humbly asked the ancestor for advice. Ancestor, I have always wanted to ask you a question. The ancestor paused for a moment and collected his emotions. He said seriously, What do you want to know? Ancestor, you have cultivated to the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm. Do you know what changes Yuanying will undergo during the cultivation process? For example, communicating with oneself, or coming back to life. The ancestor frowned suspiciously and looked at Tang Zheng in confusion. Why do you have this question? He asked. Could it be that you have personally encountered this problem? Yes. Tang Zheng did not want to hide it, so he openly admitted it. Hiss. The ancestor sucked in a breath of cold air, his eyes wide open, as if he was looking at a monster, staring straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was confused and looked back curiously. Their eyes met, and the ancestor couldn't wait to ask, "Is what you said true?" "Of course it's real," Tang Zheng replied without hesitation. He didn't understand why the patriarch's reaction was so big. This shouldn't be a big deal. "Ancestor, is there something wrong?" "Of course not." The ancestor's voice suddenly rose by many decibels, and his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. "Why don't you tell me in detail what you mean by Yuanying coming back to life?" the ancestor asked aggressively. Tang Zheng tilted his head and looked deeply at the ancestor. He then made his situation public, especially the various signs of Yuanying, which instantly attracted the attention of others. Even Xiao Bai's eyes widened. He looked at him in disbelief and asked with uncertainty, "Master, how can your Yuanying be like this?" Tang Zheng smiled bitterly and said, "How would I know? I still want to consult you." He was so smart, how could he not see the problem? His situation was probably not a common phenomenon, but unique to himself. The ancestor sighed faintly. The way he looked at Tang Zheng changed again and again. It was completely different from before, and there was even a bit of awe. Previously, when the ancestor heard that he had broken through to the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm, he did not have such an intense reaction. However, a vision of Yuanying caused him to have such a reaction, which made Tang Zheng feel uneasy. He did not know whether the vision of Yuanying was good or bad. Miwu was even more confused. She could not figure out the deep meaning of Tang Zheng's words at all, because her cultivation was too low, and she could not understand. When the ancestor saw that everyone was looking at him, he pondered for a while and slowly said, "We absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth into our bodies and gather it in our dantian to form a gold core and cultivate Yuanying. From there, we can improve our strength step by step, temper our bodies, and increase our vital qi. When we cultivate to the extreme, Yuanying will change step by step. The nascent soul will become vivid and lifelike, just like another copy of us. Like a pregnant woman, the nascent soul will nurture the nascent soul, and the nascent soul will continuously provide us with power, helping us cultivate and fight. We complement each other with Yuanying." However, the ancestor paused for a moment and changed the topic. He looked at Tang Zheng and said, "However, Yuanying will not come to life at all, let alone communicate with us." The last sentence was the key. It completely overturned Tang Zheng's previous doubts. Tang Zheng could not help but gasp. He had always thought that the various signs of Yuanying were normal, so he did not talk much about it with others. Only now did he realize that his nascent soul was a freak. It was completely different from the nascent souls of ordinary people, like the difference between heaven and earth. Everyone was aware of this point, and looking at Tang Zheng's fluctuating expression, they could roughly understand his mood. So no one disturbed him, allowing him to quietly digest this news. The ancestor's expression was more complicated than Tang Zheng's, and his eyes were unfathomable. After a long while, Tang Zheng calmed down a little and said with a wry smile, "Sai, I always thought this was a normal phenomenon, but now I know that I thought too simply. Now that things have come to this, there's no other way. We can only take one step at a time." With that, he shook his head. He had so many things to say, but he did not know where to start. "Master!" Xiao Bai shouted with mixed feelings. Tang Zheng waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to say more. "Wait a minute, you haven't heard me out." The ancestor suddenly interrupted Tang Zheng. "Now that things have come to this, what else is there to say?" Tang Zheng asked in return. The ancestor said in a deep voice, "I said that your phenomenon is not normal, and we don't have this kind of phenomenon. However, I did not say that your phenomenon is unprecedented in this world." "Precedent?" Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows, not quite understanding the ancestor's meaning. The others also looked at the ancestor curiously. The ancestor knew that it was time to unravel the mystery. If it were not for the situation with Tang Zheng, he might not have wanted to mention this matter. After all, this matter was too long ago, and it was related to the late emperor. If it were not for the fact that he had no other choice, he really did not want to mention the old matter. Your Majesty, this matter is related to the late emperor. It's related to the late emperor. Xiaobai was confused and subconsciously exclaimed. Yes, the precedent I'm talking about is the late emperor. His Yuanying also had similar signs to Tangzheng, but that was after he cultivated to the 9th grade of the Mahayana realm. When he continued to cultivate and comprehend more powerful magic, his Yuanying had this kind of mutation. A situation that only appeared after reaching the 9th grade of the Mahayana realm. That was the only thing everyone noticed. Tangzheng was now only at the 6th grade of the Mahayana realm. But there were signs that only appeared after the late emperor reached the 9th grade of the Mahayana realm. Didn't this mean that Tangzheng was better than the late emperor? Chapter 1541. Xiaobai could not hold back his curiosity and impatiently asked, Ancestor, hurry up and finish it in one breath. What exactly is going on? The ancestor said, according to the late emperor, Yuanying can come to life and even leave the body. That is an even more profound divine ability, and is the goal of his comprehension. He believed that in time, Yuanying can truly leave the body and reach the extreme of Yuanying. Clone. Clone? Tangzheng exclaimed and could not help but think of the 100 Faces Star Lord. Not only was he good at changing his appearance, but he could also create clones. During the fierce battle with him back then, he had seen him create many clones. However, the strength of each clone was not very strong, and it was more useful to confuse the opponent. Yes, it is a clone. Moreover, the strength of this clone is not inferior to the real body at all. This is equivalent to one person having the strength of 2 people. You should be able to imagine how strong this would be. The old ancestor sighed. When he first heard this news, he was also very shocked. He did not doubt it at all because this was the late emperor's deduction. Therefore, he believed it without a doubt. Did the late emperor cultivate a clone? Xiaobai asked curiously. The ancestor sighed faintly and shook his head. The late emperor had already grasped a little of the knack, and was just a little bit away from a breakthrough. He did not expect to be betrayed by that traitor, so the late emperor did not cultivate a clone. Tangzheng sighed inwardly and felt that it was a pity. If the other party had cultivated a clone, Hao Tianwang's betrayal might not have succeeded. He could deal with a powerful emperor, but he could not deal with 2 emperors of the same strength. Does Hao Tianwang know about this? Tangzheng asked. The ancestor shook his head without hesitation. He definitely does not know. This is something that the late emperor mentioned to me by chance. No one else would know. The late emperor did not want to mention too much about his cultivation to others. That's good. Tangzheng secretly rejoiced. If Hao Tianwang also knew and even cultivated in this direction, with his cultivation he might really be able to cultivate a clone. It was already extremely difficult for Tangzheng to fight against one Heavenly King Hao, and he was in a sorry state. If Heavenly King Hao still had a clone whose strength was not inferior to his own, then Tangzheng's chances would be even slimmer. Master, other people cultivate to the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm to have this situation, but you have it now. Aren't you more powerful than them? Moreover, you will also have a clone soon? Xiaobai said excitedly, not paying attention to the fact that he was talking about his late emperor. The old ancestor was a little embarrassed, but since His Majesty had already said so, it was not good for him to interrupt. He could only sigh with emotion in his heart. This Tangzheng was far more miraculous than he had imagined. Tangzheng smiled faintly and said embarrassedly, cultivating a clone is easier said than done. I believe Master can do it. Xiaobai trusted Tangzheng very much. Tangzheng wanted to cultivate a clone, and now that he had this opportunity, he had to fight for it. However, the ancestor did not know the details and had no experience to learn from, so he could only ponder over it bit by bit. Tangzheng's pure young energy was accumulating more and more. He did not dare to delay any longer, so he said goodbye. The ancestor did not care about his departure. Instead, he looked at Xiaobai. The eagerness in his eyes could not be more obvious. They did not want Xiaobai to leave with Tangzheng. Xiaobai did not think so much and said without hesitation, Master, Then let's go back quickly. As soon as he said that, the ancestor could not wait to shout, Your Majesty, you can't. What's wrong? Your Majesty, you have already returned to sky beyond heaven. You are our backbone. If you leave, what will happen to us? Sky beyond heaven cannot be without you. After saying that, the ancestor was already in tears. Miwu also panicked. She looked at Xiaobai pitifully and said, Your Majesty, the ancestor is right. You can't leave. The heavens beyond heaven is your home. This. Xiaobai was stunned. He looked at them at a loss. He then looked at Tangjung. His eyes were filled with hesitation, not knowing what to do. He had never encountered this kind of problem before. Although he had only spent a short time with the ancestor and the others, his feelings were not shallow. Especially the ancestor and the others' loyalty to the royal family, he was deeply moved. Xiaobai. Tangjung suddenly called. Xiaobai looked at him awkwardly and said, Master, what should I do? When the ancestor and Miwu heard that, they looked at Tangjung at the same time. They were very clear about the influence Tangjung's opinion had on Xiaobai. If he did not let Xiaobai stay, then Xiaobai would almost certainly leave sky beyond heaven. Therefore, they became very nervous. They were very afraid that Tangjung would say what they were afraid of. Tangjung seemed to have sensed something. He looked at the ancestor and Miwu, hesitated for a moment and said, Xiaobai, you belong to sky beyond heaven. You should stay. Although he said that, in his heart he really hoped that Xiaobai would stay by his side. Xiaobai's relationship with him was like family. They were almost inseparable. If he took the initiative to let him leave, he would be very reluctant. When the ancestor and Miwu heard this, they both sighed in relief. The thing that they were most worried about did not happen. They looked at Tangjung with eyes full of gratitude. Without a doubt, Tangjung could have asked Xiaobai to leave, but he took the initiative to let him stay. This was completely taking care of their feelings. Xiaobai was stunned and said disappointedly, Master, you don't want me anymore? A strong sense of loss was revealed, causing people's hearts to involuntarily clench. Tangjung felt the same and his heart clenched. He quickly explained, Xiaobai, that's not what I meant. You are my family. How could I not want you? You are the royal family of sky beyond heaven. You are their emperor. You are their backbone. They need you more than I do. This is the reason why I asked you to stay. Xiaobai's expression turned from gloomy to sunny. He then revealed a relieved smile and said, I knew that Master would not abandon me. Of course. But I can't bear to leave Master and the others. We will meet again. Moreover, don't you still have the ancestor and the others? They will accompany you well. In the following days, you need to use the heavenly palace and cultivate well. The next time we meet, your cultivation will surpass mine. Tangjung encouraged. How can I surpass Master? Master will definitely cultivate faster than me. Moreover, I plan to give this heavenly palace to Master. You need it more than me. Your Majesty. The ancestor was shocked. The heavenly palace was the heirloom of the royal family. To give it to an outsider like this was like being struck by lightning. Tangjung did not deserve it. How could he accept such a treasure? He immediately rejected it. Only then did the ancestor feel relieved. When I go back, I will find time to send Qi Yueshan and his son back. Sky beyond heaven is their home. They are more suitable here. Tangjung took the initiative to say. Chapter 1542. The ultimate form of yuanying was cloning, which made Tangjung look forward to the future. This matter had to be considered in the long run, and it wouldn't be successful in a short period of time. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry and treated it with a calm heart. He looked deeply at the great ancestor and said meaningfully, Great ancestor, you seem to have changed a lot during the time we were away. Changed a lot? Xiaobai was stunned, as if he didn't understand what Tangjung meant. The great ancestor looked meaningfully at Tangjung and asked, What do you see? Your cultivation seems to have improved a little, but you haven't broken through the limits of your realm, so you're still at the 4th stage of the Great Ascension realm for the time being. You have a good eye. The great ancestor nodded and admitted Tangjung's words. Since your Majesty recovered the bloodthirsty scepter, all of us have felt a change. That is, our cultivation stopped deteriorating, and after we cultivated for a while, our cultivation improved significantly. The great ancestor once said that many people's cultivation had been deteriorating unknowingly over the years. It was just a matter of time. Now, apart from the fog in the night, no one else could transform into human form. The meaning of the great ancestor's words was very obvious. Tang Zheng understood and exclaimed, "You mean your cultivation is improving, and you can transform into humans in the future?" The ancestor nodded excitedly, because this caused him to be unable to maintain his composure. Once the shackles on them were removed, then they would be like wild horses that had escaped their reins, and they would surely charge forward with indomitable will, and would surely soar into the sky and reclaim their former glory. "Wow, that's great!" Xiaobai was so surprised that he almost jumped up and cheered. "Great ancestor! Why didn't you tell me this before? This is great news." Xiaobai complained. The great ancestor lowered his head and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, this is all our speculation. We haven't succeeded in the specifics yet, so we weren't in a hurry to tell you. Please understand, Your Majesty, we definitely didn't hide it on purpose." Xiaobai patted the old ancestor's body and comforted him. "Old ancestor, what are you saying? How can I not believe you? We also hope to give His Majesty a surprise one day." "Surprise, yes, this is a huge surprise. I'm extremely happy." Xiaobai was so excited that he spoke incoherently. Tang Zheng was also very gratified. The more powerful the ancestor and the others were, the more they could assist Xiaobai in the future. When they left the house and came to the open waterfall, they looked back and saw that the waterfall was flowing down 3,000 feet. The cave was hidden behind the waterfall, and it really looked like a water curtain cave. Many of the others were cultivating in front of the waterfall, but there were also many people working. This central area had long been reclaimed, and it was the most fertile land in the world, producing all kinds of food. They were self-sufficient, so there were people carefully taking care of them every day. In the past few days, the wild dog had walked around the Suicide Valley, in a place that he did not dare to set foot in. There was actually such a scene, which often made him click his tongue in wonder. The old ancestor said that Tang Zheng was in seclusion, so he could not leave and could only stay here. At the same time, he was still a little confused, not knowing what would be waiting for him next. Suddenly, he saw Tang Zheng and the others coming out. His eyes were the most pleasing part of his ugly cheeks, firmly locked onto Tang Zheng, and flew to greet him. Tang Zheng was ready to leave this place when he suddenly saw the wild dog. His heart moved, and a plan came to his mind. The wild dog could not go back with Tang Zheng, and Kingsaman was still in the barbarian land. He did not know what the current situation was, and he did not want Tian Chanzi to find that his sect had been destroyed when he arrived at the sky beyond sky in the future. That would be difficult for him to explain. Therefore, he wanted to send the wild dog back to the barbarian land, to closely monitor the righteous path's movements, especially to find ways to protect Kingsaman. At least, Kingsaman could not be destroyed. If there was an emergency, he could ask for help from the Suicide Valley, and Xiaobai would help him. The wild dog listened to the arrangement for himself, thought for a while, and did not refuse. He had no reason to refuse. He had already stepped on Tang Zheng's boat, and if he disembarked midway, he would be the one at a disadvantage. Even an idiot, after going through a series of things, should understand that Tang Zheng was extraordinary. Following him was much more beneficial than mingling with the righteous path. The emperor did not lack hungry soldiers, and Tang Zheng did not paint a picture of the future for the wild dog, but gave him real benefits. In the past, the wild dog's cultivation relied on piecing together skills, and did not learn and cultivate systematically, but he had the cultivation of yuanying with his extraordinary talent. Of course, Tang Zheng knew the drawbacks of all these, so he generously imparted a set of skills to him. This was the skill that he had imparted to the Wu tribe, and it was obtained from the Langya Pavilion. Although it was comparable to the Heavenly Tomes and the Ksitigarbha Sutra, it was definitely not ordinary. The righteous path loved to cherish their own skills, and would never impart their own skills to outsiders. If anyone dared to steal it, they would be killed. The wild dog was restrained by this, and could do nothing but sigh from time to time. Now he had received the skills imparted by Tang Zheng, and was really ecstatic. The joy came from the sky, and almost made him faint. Since he was a child, he had been looked down upon and bullied countless times, and had long been used to people's indifference to him. This opportunity made him feel flattered. He was a person who knew how to repay kindness, and from then on, he was loyal to Tang Zheng, and would never be disloyal. In the Suicide Valley, under everyone's gaze, Tang Zheng stood on the somersault cloud, waved his hand, and rode the somersault cloud into the sky. Xiaobai hurriedly rushed up, but could not touch the somersault cloud. He could only wave his hand and shout, "Master, I will help you in the future." Xiaobai shouted loudly, especially the word master, which was particularly clear. The ancestor and the others had long been used to all this, and were not surprised. Instead, they watched the somersault cloud slowly rise into the sky. Looking at Xiaobai chasing after the somersault cloud with a lonely and desolate expression, Tang Zheng felt the same way, and kept waving his arm, and said earnestly, "Xiaobai, you cultivate well, and in the future, I will help you to take back the sky beyond sky." Xiaobai nodded heavily. "Well, master, I will wait for you. You must not leave me here alone and ignore me. I will always remember you. You are my family," Tang Zheng said with an emotional tone. Xiaobai was so excited that tears welled up in his eyes, and he nodded his head like he was pounding garlic. The somersault cloud rose to the top of the sky, as if it was only a step away from the sky. Tang Zheng activated his divine technique, and with a wave of his hand, the spatial door slowly opened. Tang Zheng lowered his head and took a deep look. The figures on the ground were already very blurry, as small as ants. "Somersault cloud, go." With a command, the somersault cloud whizzed away and disappeared behind the spatial door. After a wave of fluctuations in the air, the spatial door closed, and everything returned to calm. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1543. Crack. A bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, accompanied by the rumbling of thunder. This was a few thousand meters in the sky. A plane was passing through the thick clouds, flying past the lightning. A child's eyes widened as he looked out of the window and saw a magical scene. The sky was torn apart by that bolt of lightning, and it looked like a door. A person walked out of the door and happened to fall into the child's line of sight. The snack in the child's hand fell with a clatter, but he was oblivious to it. He jumped up in joy, but was held back tightly by the seatbelt. His sharp voice rang out in the cabin. Person, look at that person." His finger pointed straight out of the window. When the others heard this, they all looked sideways. However, the door had already disappeared, and that person had long disappeared without a trace. Everyone just thought that it was a child's prank. The person who walked out from behind the door was, of course, Tang Zheng. He easily passed through the spatial door and returned to his own world. Unexpectedly, this world was experiencing a thunderstorm. It was now winter, and the spring festival was approaching. However, the winter thunder was intermittent, and the weather was completely different from before. This world was subtly changing, and even the ordinary people felt this. Therefore, even if they saw lightning in the middle of winter, they were no longer surprised. This world was no longer the world they were familiar with. At least many ordinary people already knew about the existence of cultivators, and understood that this was a powerful group. Some people who worshipped the strong were even looking for cultivators, hoping to be apprenticed to a master. Cultivators were not inferior to celebrities. Of course, there were too few cultivators, and many were unwilling to reveal their true identities. However, the more this was the case, the more mysterious cultivators were, and the more fascinating they were to ordinary people. As for the government, they still flatly denied and kept their mouths shut. They did not acknowledge the existence of cultivators, and as for the series of mysterious events that happened in the past, they would find some lame excuses to dodge. People had long been used to all of this, and they pretended not to hear it. You say you and I understand you and I don't interfere with each other. Tang Zheng stepped on the somersault cloud and looked down at the land beneath his feet. The capital city was a huge city. Several mysterious events had occurred in the capital city, and it had long become a topic of conversation for people. Even if Tang Zheng immediately landed on the street, no one would be surprised. It was more likely that they would crazily surround him like chasing a star, and maybe ask for his autograph. Naturally, he would not do such a showy thing. Instead, he pressed down the cloud and landed outside his villa. The witches guarding the area had long recognized the somersault cloud, and had already informed the people at home. He walked out of the rain towards his door. The rain formed a dome around him, and an invisible force. It was a spectacular scene. Master! A cheer came from behind as a fairy-like figure flew over and hugged Tang Zheng from behind. The word master reminded him of Xiao Bai, but the person who came was not Xiao Bai, but Ling Er. Ling Er and he had not seen each other for a long time. Ling Er had chosen a path that was completely different from other girls, and she was very focused on it, and her results were remarkable. Tang Zheng had experienced many crises and rarely involved Ling Er. She was like an ordinary person, working hard on her own career and focusing on the career she liked. Ling Er's entire body was pressed against Tang Zheng's back. He endured her impact, and only felt a ball of softness on his back, making his heart flutter. She's grown up. He subconsciously sighed in his heart. Master, I haven't seen you in a long time. Ling Er missed you so much. Ling Er leaned her head against Tang Zheng's back. Feeling his broad back, she felt extremely at ease, as if she was leaning against the most peaceful harbor. Tang Zheng's lips curled into a faint smile and said, Ling Er, I missed you too. As he spoke, he turned around and looked at Ling Er face to face. They had not seen each other for a long time, and Ling Er had undergone earth-shattering changes. Other than the only thing that remained unchanged, she seemed to have matured a little, and had a more feminine flavor, making her even more lovable. He could not help but sweat for the other female stars. With such an opponent, those so-called top female stars would not have an easy time. In fact, it was indeed so. Ling Er was like a fairy who had appeared out of nowhere, and all the so-called beauties in the entertainment circle were inferior. In terms of beauty, few could compare. Even if there were people who could compare to her, they did not have her spiritual and immortal aura. She was like a fairy who did not eat the food of mortals, making people unable to have the thought of competing with her. Of course, there were still people who would compete with her, but Ling Er was signed to Tang Zheng's own company. The company completely sheltered her from the wind and rain, and did not cause her much trouble. Before, Tang Zheng's only condition for her to enter the entertainment circle was that she had to maintain her original heart. If her original heart was tainted by the dirty entertainment circle, then the gains would not make up for the losses. Wow, Ling Er has become beautiful. Tang Zheng opened his mouth wide and deliberately exaggerated. Ling Er shyly lowered her head, and then slowly raised her head. She blinked her big watery eyes and said, Really? Of course it's true, Tang Zheng said with a serious face. Although Ling Er did not lose her original heart, but after all, she had seen and experienced more, and her mind had matured a lot. She was no longer the ignorant girl from before. She looked at Tang Zheng with a red face and said, Master has also become more handsome. Ha ha ha. Tang Zheng was stunned for a moment, and then laughed out loud. He gently stroked her hair and said, Ling Er even knows how to praise people. You have really grown up. While they were talking, the others also came out of the room. Seeing this warm scene, no one came to disturb them, although they also wanted to talk to him. Ling Er poked her head out from Tang Zheng's embrace, looked at the others and stuck out her tongue and said, Master, if I continue to occupy you, my sisters won't let me off, he he he. The others laughed involuntarily, and Yi Dingdang said straightforwardly, Ling Er, you are becoming more and more eloquent. You even know how to joke with us. Ling Er is speaking the truth. I am not joking. Ling Er stuck out her tongue and said sincerely. Her big watery eyes seemed to be able to speak. Ling Er, if your fans saw your cute appearance, I'm afraid their hearts would melt. Feng Shishir teased. Ling Er's face became even redder. She was even more attractive than a ripe apple, and even women could not help but feel their hearts palpitate. Ling Er intimately held onto Tang Zheng's arm and hid in his embrace. She secretly looked at Feng Shishir and said coquettishly, Big sister is also making fun of me. While they were talking and laughing, the rain in the sky did not stop, but the rain had no way of penetrating this space. Chapter 1544. Inside the villa, there was laughter and joy, and the atmosphere was harmonious. Everyone was happy for Tang Zheng's return. However, as there were too many girls around, it was obvious that there were more females than males. Tang Zheng had become the center of attention. Almost every girl chatted with Tang Zheng for a while before they calmed down. Otherwise, their resentful gazes would be enough to make Tang Zheng suffer. Where's His Majesty? Why didn't he come back? Before Tang Zheng could tell them what happened to Grandmaster Beyond Heaven, someone had already asked him. That person was none other than the Red Lunar Beast. He had been looking for Xiao Bai all this while. However, he could not find him at all. He could not help but feel anxious. He knew how dangerous Grandmaster Beyond Heaven was. He was worried that Xiao Bai might have met with some mishap. His eyes were filled with anxiety. He stayed in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven. What? Why would His Majesty stay in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven? What happened? The Red Lunar Beast misunderstood and shouted in shock. Don't worry. Don't worry. Tang Zheng quickly waved his hand and signaled the Red Lunar Beast to calm down. Xiao Bai met the Patriarch, who was your guardian back then, and the other subordinates. Therefore, he stayed in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven to fight with them. Guardian? The Red Lunar Beast's eyes twitched. Is he still alive? Back then, the Red Lunar Beast was the Red Lunar Beast General. He had parted ways with the Patriarch and lost contact with him. The Patriarch hid in Suicide Valley to recuperate. The Red Lunar Beast thought that the Patriarch had died. Seeing the Red Lunar Beast's impatience, the rest of the people stared at Tang Zheng curiously. Tang Zheng took the opportunity to tell them what happened in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven. Everyone's hearts trembled with fear as they listened. Especially when they heard that Heavenly King Hao had faked his death. The Red Lunar Beast was furious and shouted, "Despicable!" In the past he had heard the news of Hao Tianwang's death. That was why he had tried his best to destroy his enemy. However, King Wuling was not someone to be trifled with, and he had a large number of helpers. In the end, the Red Lunar Beast was utterly defeated. He had no choice but to leave his hometown and search for the whereabouts of the royal family. The villa was completely silent. Only the heavy breathing of the Red Lunar Beast could be heard. Little Yu could feel her father's mood. She obediently snuggled up to him and squeaked softly. Tang Zheng coughed and broke the silence. He comforted, "Red Lunar Beast, no Red Lunar Beast General, I will find a day to send you back to Grandmaster Beyond Heaven. I will let you and your former comrades reclaim the glory that belongs to you under the leadership of Xiao Bai." The Red Lunar Beast suddenly raised his head. His eyes shone brightly. He mumbled to himself as if he was possessed. "Red Lunar General. It has been a long time since someone called me that. I am ashamed of the title of general bestowed upon me by the late emperor." After he finished speaking, he actually burst into tears and prostrated himself deeply on the ground. His body trembled, causing everyone to be moved. Little Yu was at a loss. She was patting her father with her little paws as if she was comforting him. Tang Zheng heaved a heavy sigh and said, "Red Lunar Beast General, don't blame yourself. Let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones. We have to focus on the future. We will take back what we have lost little by little." The Red Lunar Beast slowly raised his head. Although there were still tears in his eyes, he gradually stopped moving. Like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed, he nodded heavily and said through gritted teeth, "Yes, we must take it back." He was full of vigor. He seemed to have regained the demeanor and aura of a general. Tian Chanzi looked anxious. This was because he had heard news about his sect. After the Red Lunar Beast finished speaking, he could not wait to ask, "Brat, you said that the distinct Void sect almost suffered a calamity of annihilation and suffered grievances from the righteous faction. What exactly happened?" Feng Shishir was Tian Chanzi's disciple. She was also a member of Kingsman. She looked at Tang Zheng at the same time. She was worried about the safety of her sect. Tang Zheng knew that they would have this question. He told them about the time he and Xiao Bai used their divine senses to travel to the outer sky and helped Kingsman to scare off their enemies. Tian Chanzi sighed and said, "Young man, you have a conscience. If you don't save them, Humph, I will teach you a lesson. Tang Zheng sneered. In the past, Tian Chanzi might have been able to teach Tang Zheng a lesson. Now Tian Chanzi was no match for Tang Zheng. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. However, their relationship was not ordinary. Tang Zheng was used to Tian Chanzi's tone, and did not find it strange. Tian Chanzi hesitated and said, Kingsaman is my sect. I will not allow the righteous sects to ostracize my sect. The next time you go to the outer sky, you must take me with you. I will stand up for my sect, and let the righteous sects know that Kingsaman is not to be trifled with. Even if Kingsaman has declined, I will not allow them to bully Kingsaman. Tian Chanzi was filled with righteous indignation. He looked like he was ready to go all out. Tang Zheng laughed. You are their senior. They are your disciples. When the time comes, you will be able to show off in front of them. Tian Chanzi looked angry. He glared at Tang Zheng and corrected him. I have always been very impressive. Master, when the time comes, I will also go. Fang Shishir volunteered. Tian Chanzi was overjoyed. He laughed and praised. That's my good disciple. There were many things to do in the world. He was not in a hurry to go to the outer sky. He could only comfort them. Did anything happen while I was gone? Tang Zheng asked with a serious expression. After Li Xiaoyan's cultivation improved, he reorganized the Li Palace and sorted out the intelligence system. Not only did he improve the overall cultivation and strength of the disciples of the Li Palace, but he also improved the intelligence system greatly. Li Xiaotian restrained her smile and said in a methodical manner, the Li Palace has been secretly monitoring the situation in various places. After the battle in the capital, it was calm and peaceful. Whether it was the government or other forces, they all ceased their activities and did not stir up any more waves. Tang Zheng nodded. The capital was his headquarters. Almost all the people he cared about were in the capital. If the capital was in turmoil, they would definitely be affected. This was what he cared about the most. Li Xiaotian understood him very well, so he first reported the situation in the capital to put him at ease. The Empyrean fairy left the capital to find a body for the Emperor of Heaven to return to life. Ever since she left the capital, she has disappeared. Her strength is too high and she is alone. The disciples of the Li Palace cannot keep up with her, nor can they provide her with protection. Li Xiaotian said with shame. He felt that the Li Palace really needed to increase its strength. Otherwise, this kind of embarrassing situation would happen again and again. It was truly too shameful. Tang Zheng did not mind. After all, the Empyrean fairy was an expert of the Mahayana realm. How could an ordinary disciple of the Li Palace keep up with her? Yanqingyi is still missing. I don't know if she is hiding somewhere to continue comprehending the heavenly Tao, Li Xiaotian said with a frown. After Yanqingyi used a talisman to unexpectedly escape from Tang Zheng's hands, she disappeared without a trace, as if she had evaporated into thin air. Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows and his expression became serious. Whether Yanqingyi was a friend or a foe, he really could not tell at the moment. With such an opponent lurking in the shadows, he felt a great deal of pressure. Then what about Dianan? Tang Zheng took a deep breath and asked again. This was the first enemy he had prepared to deal with. After the battle in the capital, Ji Wuxiang had fled back to Dianan. Therefore, before he left, he had ordered that the wind and grass in Dianan must be closely monitored. Chapter 1545. Wuxia left Sumeru world and stood in the villa, looking at a circle of people staring at him with wide eyes. In his eyes, there was only one person, Tian Chanzi. He seemed to have realized something and anxiously asked Tang Zheng, "Is there any progress on my matter?" After Tian Chanzi agreed, Tang Zheng cut the Gordian knot, and simply called Wuxia out to clarify the matter of the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul in front of everyone. Yes, he promised you. Tang Zheng pointed at Tian Chanzi and said. Wuxia was overjoyed and almost jumped up in excitement, saying, "That's great." A pair of eyes stared straight at the heaven monk, blazing with passion, like a pervert staring at a great beauty hungrily. Tian Chanzi felt a bit uncomfortable under his gaze and said, "Don't look at me like that. I just want you to give up. There is no Yellow Emperor's remnant soul in my body." Mo Xie smiled faintly and said, "This isn't something that can be explained with just a few words. It needs to be verified before we can know." Heaven Monk urged impatiently, "Then hurry up and verify it, so that you can give up on this thought, and I can also be free." "Wouldn't it have been easier if you had done this earlier?" Mo Xie muttered. Tian Chanzi glared and said, "If you say one more word, I won't let you verify it." Under the eaves, the dignified Mo Xie could only lower his head and resentfully said, "I won't say any more, I won't say any more." Mo Xie had already been worn down by Tian Chanzi and refused to agree. His patience and confidence were about to be exhausted. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was Mo Xie's only hope. If he didn't revive the Yellow Emperor, then he wouldn't be able to stir up any waves, let alone recreate yesterday's glory. He had already seen that Tang Zheng's rise was too fast, and even Ji Wuxiang had suddenly risen. Even Qiyu had died at their hands. He simply wasn't enough. It was precisely because he was clear of this that he didn't dare to act rashly when he saw Tang Zheng again. Nor did he dare to use his identity. Just now, he had only glanced at Tang Zheng, and he had already seen the clues. Tang Zheng's cultivation had probably increased again. He couldn't wait to revive the Yellow Emperor. Otherwise, if Tang Zheng was strong enough, then the revived Yellow Emperor might not have a place in this world. The others looked at the two of them curiously. They had only heard of the Yellow Emperor's name, and had almost never seen him in person. Only a few people knew that the remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor possessed Tian Chanzi's body back then. Of course, Tang Zheng wasn't too worried. He was already strong enough, and the resurrection of the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul might not be too strong. After all, it was just a remnant soul, and it couldn't possibly have the full strength of the Yellow Emperor. It was precisely because of this that he dared to agree to Mo Xie's request without fear. Mo Xie walked step by step towards Tian Chanzi. Tian Chanzi was calm and composed as he stood there calmly. When Mo Xie stopped and faced him face to face, he felt a little uncomfortable. "Is it necessary to get so close?" Tian Chanzi asked unhappily. Mo Xie nodded seriously. "Yes. Because I want to see you clearly." Tian Chanzi snorted heavily and didn't say anything else. Tang Zheng silently circulated his energy. He wasn't just here to watch the show. The two of them were so close to each other, and Tian Chanzi's cultivation wasn't as high as Mo Xie's, so if Mo Xie tried to do something to Tian Chanzi, he would have to stop him in time. Therefore, he wasn't relaxed at all. "Then I'll start," Mo Xie said as he raised his hands and clasped Tian Chanzi's shoulders. Tian Chanzi suddenly trembled, and his expression changed slightly, but he didn't overreact. Tang Zheng clenched his fists, and then loosened them. A mysterious energy surged out, filling the entire villa. Everyone subconsciously opened their eyes wide, and each one of them was like a curious baby, staring at the scene without blinking. Tian Chanzi felt a wave of energy enter his body from his shoulders, like an earthworm swimming through his meridians, constantly probing. He didn't feel any pain, but rather a strange feeling. After all, it was the first time in his life that he had let someone else's energy enter his body so freely. He wasn't worried about the danger, and he believed that Tang Zheng would be fully prepared. If Mo Xie made any movements, it wouldn't be able to escape Tang Zheng's fiery eyes of truth. He looked at Mo Xie with ridicule as if to say, "Don't waste your energy, there's no Yellow Emperor's remnant soul." Mo Xie acted as if he didn't see it, and continued his tireless exploration. From the heart, he followed the meridians to the Zifu, and saw Tian Chanzi's yuanying. However, his yuanying had his eyes closed, like a sleeping baby, and wasn't as lively and active as Tang Zheng's yuanying. The heart and Zifu had been explored, and the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was nowhere to be found. Mo Xie couldn't help but feel gloomy. Tian Chanzi saw this and deliberately ridiculed. "What? You still don't believe my words? You won't give up until you see the Yellow River, and won't cry until you see the coffin." Mo Xie clenched his teeth, and his expression changed a few times. "I haven't finished exploring. It's too early to make a conclusion." Tian Chanzi curled his lips and said disapprovingly, "You've already finished exploring. What do you mean you haven't finished exploring?" Mo Xie's gaze moved up and locked onto Tian Chanzi's head. "And here." Tian Chanzi's entire body tensed up, and he said loudly, "What are you doing? This is my head, the place I know the most. Even if the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul is here, it can't be hidden here." Tian Chanzi obviously didn't want Wuxia to explore his brain. After all, the brain was a person's most secret place, and also their most vulnerable place. If he had evil intentions, a single thought could make Tian Chanzi suffer, or even kill him. In addition, there were too many secrets in the brain, and no one wanted their secrets to be exposed. "If I don't explore, how would I know it's not here?" Wuxia asked back. "Didn't you want me to give up? If there's nothing in your brain, then I'll completely give up. From now on, I won't bother you anymore." Tang Zheng naturally knew the risks of this, but he didn't say anything to stop him. Tian Chanzi would weigh the pros and cons himself. Sure enough, after Tian Chanzi weighed the pros and cons, he said, Then I'll make you completely give up. Go ahead and explore. Don't worry, this won't harm you." Wuxia comforted him, and the mysterious power drilled into Tian Chanzi's brain. Sure enough, he didn't feel any discomfort. This power wandered around his brain, touching every area, but Wuxia knew the limits and didn't explore Tian Chanzi's secrets. The brain area wasn't big, but its structure was complex, and it was a good place to hide. But it wasn't easy to hide it from the owner. Tian Chanzi believed that Wuxia's actions were superfluous, because he firmly believed in his understanding of himself. His brain was almost completely explored, and Tian Chanzi already had a playful look on his face. He couldn't help but ridicule him. Suddenly, boom! A surge of power burst out from the depths of his brain. There was a mistake in the previous chapter. After Huang Xiang was possessed by the inner demons, he died in battle. I wrote it again, and now I'm saying that Huang Xiang is dead and won't appear. To read the latest error-free novel, please visit Chapter 1546. The strength of this power was beyond anyone's imagination. Tian Chanzi was suddenly startled. His expression became very interesting as his eyes widened in disbelief. This was because he couldn't be more familiar with this power. It had left a deep impression on him, and he would never forget it even if he died. His teeth chattered as if they were trembling. He said in a trembling voice, "The remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor." The others had already noticed Tian Chanzi's abnormality, but the power was still bound in his brain. For a moment no one noticed it, so after hearing these words, they were shocked. They understood that the problem they were most worried about had appeared. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul really did exist in his body, and it was in the most important part of his brain. Everyone's expression changed at the same time. The brain was a person's most secret place. The fact that the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul could hide in it and escape Tian Chanzi's detection was already heaven-defying. It was obvious how powerful the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was. If a remnant soul was already so powerful, it was hard to imagine what kind of scene it would be if the Yellow Emperor really came back to life. Everyone was aware of this point, so they all looked at Tang Zheng at the same time. Tang Zheng had already calmed down. On the surface, he looked calm and composed, but there was a slight ripple in his heart. However, he didn't make any excessive moves. He had already determined that the Yellow Emperor was indeed powerful, but he was still a remnant soul. Even if he came back to life, he wouldn't be able to reach the peak state he had in the past. If it was in the past, Tang Zheng would be hesitant. However, after exchanging blows with Hao Tianwang, his heart had become much stronger. He no longer had a strong fear of the so-called strong. So what if the Yellow Emperor came back to life? Not to mention whether he was a friend or a foe. Even if the Yellow Emperor really wanted to deal with him, he still had a way to deal with it. On the other hand, if the Heaven Monk continued to hide this hidden danger, what if something happened to him in the future? That would be the scene that Tang Zheng did not want to see the most. Tian Chanzi had regained his composure. He knew that he still had a chance to fight back. Although the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was in his brain, he still had a way to deal with it. At worst, both sides would suffer heavy losses and perish together. That would not be a threat to Tang Zheng. He subconsciously looked at Tang Zheng, wanting to ask him for a countermeasure. When their eyes met, Tang Zheng immediately understood what Tian Chanzi was thinking. He firmly shook his head, and his eyes were calm. He was trying to persuade Tian Chanzi not to act rashly and do something stupid. Tian Chanzi felt a chill in his heart, and a warm feeling arose spontaneously. Tang Zheng's firm attitude gave him confidence and hope. He took a deep breath, calmly looked at Wuxia and asked, "You're really lucky. You actually found it." Wuxia's mood could not be described with the word ecstatic. He could not hide the joy on his face. When he heard Tian Chanzi's words, he subconsciously raised his head, and their blazing eyes met. Wuxia blurted out, "Because it's the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. I know it won't disappear so easily." Tian Chanzi snorted. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had once greatly increased his cultivation. It could be considered an opportunity. He asked in a deep voice. "Then what are you going to do?" "Of course I'm going to take out the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul, and then help him revive," Wuxia said without hesitation. Hiss. Although everyone had already guessed this result, when Wuxia personally confirmed it, some people could not help but gasp. There would be one more expert in this world. "Then take it out. I don't want to have another person in my head." Tian Chanzi pretended to be calm and at ease. In fact, it was impossible to say that he was not worried at all. This was a case of pulling one hair and affecting the whole body. Any small mistake could cause great harm to him. Wuxia was surprised by Tian Chanzi's attitude. He thought that he would deliberately make things difficult for him. He did not expect that he would agree so easily. He stared blankly at Tian Chanzi. For a moment he did not reply. Tian Chanzi raised his eyebrows and said unhappily, "What, you don't plan on taking it out? Then I'll change my mind." No. You misunderstood." Wuxia hurriedly denied. How could he not want to take it out? However, he hemmed and hawed, as if he had something he could not say. "You're a man. What are you being so wishy-washy about? If you have something to say, then say it," Tian Chanzi urged in a rough voice. He was once the #1 general under the Yellow Emperor. Even though he was yelled at by Tian Chanzi, he did not lose his temper. Although they were once enemies, Wuxia could not help but sigh at Tian Chanzi's magnanimity and bravery. His face turned cold and he said seriously, "This matter is not something that I can do alone. I need the help of others." As he spoke, his gaze shifted to Tang Zheng. His attitude was extremely humble and respectful. Facing Tang Zheng, he did not have the slightest bit of arrogance. In ancient times, many strong people paid attention to the principle that those who reached the top were first. They would not use their status just because they had lived for many years. Wuxia was one of them. Therefore he admired and respected Tang Zheng. He said sincerely, "Tang Zheng, I want to ask you for help. I don't know if you will agree." "Ask me?" Tang Zheng was shocked. He pointed at his nose. He did not think that Wuxia would ask him for help. Wuxia nodded and said, "I originally did not think that the remnant soul would be in his brain. If it was anywhere else, I could safely take it out by myself. But it is in his brain. In order to avoid harming him, I can only ask you for help. Your cultivation is higher than mine, so you will be able to control this process better." Wuxia spoke bluntly, making Tang Zheng have a good impression of him. He looked at Tian Chanzi and nodded heavily. "Fine, I promise you." Tian Chanzi smiled and said, "With you little brat participating, I will be more assured. Then I will leave my 100 pounds to you. Don't mess it up. If you turn me into a fool, I will beat you up." Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily and said, "I won't turn you into a fool. Eating my food, using my things and having me take care of you. That would be a waste." Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. The two of them looked at each other and burst out laughing at the same time, full of lofty sentiments. Wuxia looked at the two deeply. He could not help but recall the scene when he was with the emperor. Was it not the same? For a moment, he had a feeling that Tang Zheng's achievements in the future would not be lower than the emperor's. In fact, although Tang Zheng's cultivation was high and his progress was very fast, he never thought that his achievements would be comparable to the emperor's. After all, the emperor was an unattainable peak in Wuxia's heart. Basically, no one could reach it. Even Qiyu could not reach it. Wuxia once thought that there was no one in the world who could compare to the emperor. But at this moment, Wuxia looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze. It was as if he saw the emperor when he was young. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1547. Tianqianzi stood quietly in the middle of the room. Everyone else retreated to avoid disturbing the three of them. Tang Zheng and Wuxia stood on either side of Tianqianzi, one on the left and one on the right. They extended 2 fingers and tapped on Tianqianzi's temples. This time, they were even more direct. They skipped over the other parts of the body and directly acted on the brain. At this point, Tianqianzi's expression was a little nervous. He took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down. He didn't have any abnormal reactions to avoid being laughed at by Wuxia. Tang Zheng had already communicated with Wuxia, so he was very clear about the specific implementation process. The power of the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was too great, and it was very likely that it would unconsciously counterattack any kind of power. Previously, Wuxia had only used a special ability to resonate with the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul, but it hadn't actually touched him. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had already begun to counterattack. Fortunately, Tianqianzi's own strength was strong enough. If it was a normal person, their head would have been shattered by the counterattack. The two of them divided the work. One of them was responsible for using his power to resist the counterattack of the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul, while the other was responsible for guiding the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul out. If they worked together like this, they would be able to avoid harming the Heaven Monk. Tang Zheng wasn't proficient in this, but after listening to Wuxia's plan, he couldn't find any loopholes, so he did as he was told. The power of the two entered Tianqianzi's brain at the same time. Tianqianzi controlled his own power and didn't counterattack. The two powers arrived at the depths of his brain, where the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was hiding. Tang Zheng was no stranger to the structure of the brain. After all, there was a dragon mark in his glabella. Moreover, there was a fire seed in the depths of his brain. The fire seed was ignited from this fire seed. Now it was the heavenly fire. If other people entered his brain, they would be very surprised to find that the things in his brain were very different from those of normal people. Of course, he would never allow anyone to enter his mind. There were too many secrets hidden within. That power seemed to be equivalent to Tang Zheng's eyes. He could clearly see the scene in his brain. A fog-like thing was hidden in the deepest corner, covered by darkness. If it wasn't for Wuxia's special power that resonated with this remnant soul, it wouldn't have been so easy to discover. No wonder Tianqianzi couldn't find any clues after so long. Tang Zheng and Wuxia looked at each other and nodded slightly. This was the signal to begin. Tang Zheng controlled his power and turned it into thousands of threads. Just like the blood threads created by the Bloodthirst Scepter, they quickly wrapped around the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. Before the two parties even made contact, the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had already reacted. Boom! A surge of power surged out, like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves, wanting to sweep away all the power in the surroundings. This surge of power was obviously stronger than the previous resonance. If it was allowed to spread, Tianqianzi's brain would definitely be affected. How could Tang Zheng just let it happen? He already had a countermeasure. He immediately circulated his power, and the thousands of threads of power immediately intertwined together, forming a thick eggshell that blocked the surging impact. Boom, 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 boom. Wave after wave of power failed to break through this eggshell-like barrier. Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't figure out how powerful the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was, so he could only use all his strength. In fact, he didn't have to do this. He was already at the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm. Since ancient times, it was already considered a shocking realm. He used all his strength to defend against the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul's counterattack, which was more than enough. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul seemed to be very surprised that its counterattack had failed. It hurriedly retreated, as if it was running away. However, Tang Zheng knew that it was definitely not running away. After all, this was the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. How could it run away when facing difficulties? If it was really that kind of person, it wouldn't have been able to achieve such great achievements. It was definitely preparing a stronger counterattack. Mo Xie realized that Tang Zheng's power had already enveloped the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul, and he couldn't penetrate this barrier to see what was going on inside. He couldn't help but remind him in a low voice, "Be careful. Don't be careless." Tang Zheng didn't say a word and concentrated. Mo Xie collected his thoughts and focused on his work. He and the power were like a wheel, carrying the egg and moving out of the brain. It moved very slowly, afraid that it would alarm the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. Boom! A violent impact caused the barrier to tremble. Mo Xie immediately felt it. His nerves couldn't help but tense up, and he subconsciously stopped the movement of the power. Seeing this, Tang Zheng hurriedly urged him, "Don't stop. I'm here. Do what you need to do." Mo Xie took a deep breath and suppressed the waves in his heart. He urged the power to move again. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul moved out bit by bit. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had already realized that it was being guided out. It didn't know what was going on, but it judged it as a threat. Since it was a threat, it had to be eliminated with lightning speed. Thus, the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul's counterattack immediately went up a level. It seemed to be using all of its power, crazily attacking the barrier. Boom boom boom. It was like a clap of thunder, exploding in Tian Chanzi's head. Tian Chanzi immediately frowned. He couldn't help but hug his head and pretend to be in pain. Ah! Feng Shishir turned pale with fright. She was worried about her master's safety. However, the others couldn't help. They could only place their hopes on Tang Zheng and Mo Xie. It was as if their hearts were in the air. Tang Zheng gradually understood the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. It was true that it was strong, but it wasn't to the point where Tang Zheng couldn't control it. Thus, he calmed down and continued to strengthen the barrier. No matter how much the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul attacked, it was useless. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul is indeed extraordinary. Even a mere remnant soul can burst forth with such great power. What was the Yellow Emperor's cultivation level when he was alive? I still don't know. He was actually absent-minded. His thoughts were drifting off to who knows where. On the other hand, Mo Xie had been very careful, as if he was facing a great enemy. If he knew Tang Zheng's current situation, he would probably vomit blood. Big brother, how can you be absent-minded at this critical moment? Yuanying can cultivate a doppelganger in the future, and the doppelganger has its own ability to move. Does that mean that he will also have a soul? Should I give him a part of me, or should I give him another soul? His thoughts drifted further and further away, as if they were about to float to the heavens beyond the heavens. I'll be out soon. Mo Xie's words finally pulled his thoughts back to the real world. He glanced at Mo Xie, whose forehead was covered in sweat, and felt ashamed in his heart. While others were facing a great enemy, he actually made a small mistake. Sinful, sinful. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had already reached his temple, and was only a thin line away from the outside world. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul's counterattack was getting more and more intense, but it was still ineffective. Come out! Mo Xie let out a low roar, and Tian Chanzi's temple erupted with a ball of light. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul finally saw the light of day again. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1548. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul burst out with a ball of light that was exceptionally dazzling, instantly attracting everyone's attention. However, if one looked closely, they would find that this ball of light was mostly blocked by a thin barrier. Although the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had seen the light of day again, it was still enveloped by Tang Zheng's power. If Tang Zheng were to suddenly attack at this moment, the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul would definitely not be able to resist for long. Mo Xie was very clear on this point, so his expression became very serious. He looked at Tang Zheng with apprehension, deeply afraid that he would suddenly attack and completely fail. After all, both sides were once enemies. No one could guarantee that they would not attack at the last moment. Mo Xie could not help but feel a little regretful. Previously, he only wanted to extract the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul, but he did not think that after extracting it, the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul would be in danger. He was secretly remorseful and nervous to the extreme. The sweat on his head flowed down like rain, drenching his clothes. Tang Zheng glanced at Wuxia. How could he not guess his thoughts? He smiled brightly and said, Wuxia, this is the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul that you've been dreaming of. Take it. As soon as he finished speaking, Tang Zheng withdrew his power. Pa pa pa. Cracks appeared on the eggshell-like barrier and it shattered. A blazing light immediately burst out, as if there was another sun in the room. It was especially dazzling. Wuxia's heart, which had been suspended in midair, immediately returned to his chest. He did not even have time to take a deep breath as he hurriedly took out a small porcelain bottle and covered the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. Once the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul was released, it would fly everywhere. In the end, no one knew where it would end up. Wuxia naturally could not just let it be. Just like the Emperor of Heaven, a small porcelain bottle could contain the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. However, the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had already lost its consciousness. It was not like the Emperor of Heaven's remnant soul that had a clear consciousness and could even communicate freely with others. The Yellow Emperor's remnant soul could not do this. The light dissipated, leaving only a porcelain bottle floating quietly in the air. Wuxia glanced at Tang Zheng and shamefully put away the porcelain bottle. He was worried that Tang Zheng would make a move at the last minute. But now it seemed that he was measuring the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Wuxia felt extremely ashamed and had nothing to say. Tang Zheng's expression was calm as he said, You already have the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. Are you going to revive him next? Wuxia nodded. Of course. Tang Zheng's expression tightened as he asked, Will it be like what happened on Mount Tianshan, where all living beings in the world will be poisoned and destroyed? This was the question that Tang Zheng was most concerned about. If things continued like this, then no matter what, he would keep Wuxia here. He had already helped him obtain the remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor, so he had fulfilled his promise. Even if he captured him again, he would not break his promise. Wuxia lowered his head in shame, unable to face the crowd. Back then, he was blinded by lard and only wanted to revive the Yellow Emperor. He did not hesitate to use the Golden Crow's soul again and again, causing all living beings in the world to be destroyed. If Tang Zheng and the others had not stopped him, he would have made a big mistake. Later on, Wuxia suffered a crushing defeat and became a loner. He stayed in Shumi world by himself for so long. He constantly reflected on why he had failed. In the end, he realized that he had deviated from the original intention of the Yellow Emperor. The Yellow Emperor was a benevolent ruler, a ruler praised by the people. However, what he had done was to destroy the people. For his own benefit, he had done anything. What was the difference between him and the Jiuli tribe in Chiyu? He regretted it. He also felt lucky. If the Yellow Emperor had really been revived and knew what he had done, he would not have tolerated him. Looking at his ashamed and speechless appearance, Tang Zheng knew that things had taken a turn for the better. Sure enough, Wuxia finally raised his head again. The guilt in his eyes could not be erased. His entire aura had undergone a huge change. He took a deep breath and promised, I promise you that I will not make the same mistake a second time. Back then, I used the Golden Crow's soul to revive the Yellow Emperor. I was blinded by greed and my mind was blinded. After thinking about it, I am very ashamed. I have let down those who have died. Everyone looked at him in surprise and listened to him repent for what he had done. Tang Zheng's mind raced as he gradually understood his original state of mind. They were revived and came to a brand new world. Their bodies and minds had undergone a huge change. Especially their state of mind, which was completely different from back then. That was why they wanted to restore the world to its original state. That was why they were so obsessed with their backbone. The Yellow Emperor. That was why they tried so hard to revive him. Now Wuxia had already adapted to this world and the changes. Moreover, his failure allowed him to calm down. Only then did he realize how ridiculous his actions were. No one said anything. They seemed to have been affected by Wuxia's emotions. Even more people sighed in relief. If he continued to be stubborn, there would definitely be a conflict between the two sides. My actions have already committed a heinous crime. When the Yellow Emperor is revived, I will naturally ask for his forgiveness and take responsibility for my sins. He seemed to have used all his strength to say these words. Sweat continued to flow from his body. This wisp of the Yellow Emperor's soul is very complete. It is not as fragmented as the Golden Crow's soul. Therefore, there is no need for it to condense like the Golden Crow's soul. Naturally, that kind of disaster will not happen. I will choose a suitable body for the dead and revive him. I will definitely not harm any innocent people. Emosia promised. After saying these words, his state of mind seemed to have become magnanimous. He faced Tang Zheng directly and accepted Tang Zheng's scrutiny. He no longer hid anything. Tang Zheng stared at him with a burning gaze. After examining him for a long time, he could see the magnanimity in his eyes. He no longer hid anything. He had truly come to his senses. However, he did not forgive Emosia. After all, his actions had caused great harm to this world. Countless creatures had died because of him. He would never be able to wash away this sin in his lifetime. Even though he had come to his senses, he still had to bear these sins. From Emosia's heavy gaze, he could see that these sins were tormenting his heart. This was something he deserved to bear. Tang Zheng nodded and asked, "Then where do you plan to go?" "I don't know. In this boundless world, I will find a suitable body to revive the emperor," Emosia said with certainty. Tang Zheng did not want to keep him. He muttered, "I hope you remember what you said today. Don't make the same mistake again. Otherwise, even if you go to the ends of the earth, I will still find you. No matter who wants to protect you, it will be useless." The current Tang Zheng had the qualifications and ability to leave behind such fierce words. No one dared to question him. Emosia nodded heavily. Without saying a word, he walked out step by step. His footsteps were heavy, as if there was 1,000 kilograms of weight on his body. To read a novel without mistakes, please visit Chapter 1549. Emosia left, leaving behind a room full of people who fell into silence. Everyone looked at each other because Emosia's sudden awakening made them all emotional. However, they also let out a sigh of relief. At least they were sure that there would be no more danger of the Golden Crow's soul burning the earth. As for the Yellow Emperor's resurrection, whether he was a friend or foe, that was something that could not be determined for the time being. In fact, Tang Zheng was looking forward to seeing this legendary figure with his own eyes. He wanted to see for himself how extraordinary this legendary figure was. Master, I have something to say to you." Ling Er's clear and gentle voice sounded. "Oh." Tang Zheng looked at her with a burning gaze. "Ling Er, what is it?" "There is something that I am unable to decide, and I want to ask for Master's opinion." Ling Er said hesitantly. "What is it?" "There was once when I accidentally used a spell in front of people, and was photographed by them. That's why there are many rumors about me in the outside world, thinking that I am a cultivator. I don't know if I should admit it or deny it." Ling Er looked at Tang Zheng with sparkling eyes. Tang Zheng's eyebrows jumped and said, "There was actually such a thing." I know. Yi Dingdang jumped up from the sofa and said impatiently, "I saw this news when I was reading the gossip news. Many people are doubtful and many people are looking forward to it. Especially Ling Er's fans, they are looking forward to Ling Er being a cultivator." Ling Er looked gratefully at Yi Dingdang and quickly nodded to confirm this news. "Why?" Tang Zheng was confused and did not understand. Yi Dingdang said proudly, "Who told you to run around all day and not even know what is going on in this world? In the past, you have always deliberately hidden your cultivator identity, and did not want the general public to know. But after these few battles and strange phenomena, the existence of cultivators is no longer a secret. The general public is not stupid. No matter how the government tries to refute the rumors, the general public will still think so." "So what?" Tang Zheng still didn't understand and asked. "Since ancient times, humans have always worshipped the strong. Since cultivators are so strong, they would naturally be worshipped by others and gain a large number of fans." Yi Dingdang rolled her eyes. "These are all very simple questions. You actually don't understand." Tang Zheng blushed with shame and laughed involuntarily. "I'm too stupid. That's the truth." Yi Dingdang was as proud as a white swan, raising her snow-white neck. Tian Chanzi muttered to himself for a long time, as if he had recovered from the previous situation. He glanced at Yi Dingdang and said, "Little girl, Yi is right. When the ancient cultivators were at their peak, there were indeed many fans. Especially in many large sects, there were many outer sect disciples. These disciples were unable to cultivate the true divine abilities of the sect, but many of them still enjoyed it and fought tooth and nail to enter. See, I was right." Yi Dingdang spread out her hands and said proudly. Tang Zheng nodded thoughtfully. He had overlooked this problem, but he also understood Ling Er's meaning. If she announced her identity, she would not be in too much danger and would gain more fans. Even if she denied it, it would not be Ling Er's style. She had always been straightforward and would not lie. This matter had already been hyped up by the fans. If she did not respond directly, it would not be in line with Ling Er's character and would cause a knot in her heart. For cultivators, there would always be a knot in their heart. In the future, it could develop into inner demons and hinder their cultivation. Tang Zheng naturally did not want to see this scene. Looking at Ling Er's expectant eyes, he asked, "Ling Er, after you announce your identity, you will not be in any danger, right?" Ling Er has never been lazy and has never slacked off in cultivation. Although I am not as strong as Master, I still have the ability to protect myself, Ling Er said without fear. Alright, if you want to announce your identity, then go ahead. In order to not leave a knot in Ling Er's heart because of this matter in the future, he agreed. Ling Er's face immediately revealed a brilliant smile. Clearly, she was also prepared to announce her identity. She did not want to hide it from those who liked her. Wow, Ling Er, from now on you will become a superstar. You will leave all the other stars in the dust. No one will be able to compare to you. Yi Dingdang exclaimed exaggeratedly with her mouth wide open. Ling Er said shyly, "How am I that strong? I still have a lot of things to learn." Tang Zheng then turned his head to Li Xiaotian and said, "Li Palace must do a good job of gathering information. After this news is announced, if there is any place or person that is unfavorable to Ling Er, you must report to me as soon as possible." Li Xiaotian knew the position Ling Er had in Tang Zheng's eyes. He did not dare to neglect and nodded heavily. It was already late at night. Everyone chatted for a while before Tian Chanzi and Tang Dehai said their goodbyes and returned to their own villa. This villa had become Tang Zheng's property. Other than the few women and Tang Zheng, everyone else lived in other villas. Once they left, the surroundings quieted down. Everyone looked at each other. The meaning in their eyes could not be more obvious. They were all women. How could they not understand each other's thoughts? Ling Er had been influenced by what she saw and heard. She was no longer the little girl who did not know anything. Her quick-witted eyes turned and she playfully said, "I'll go back to my room to rest first." With that, she flew up to the second floor with a tap of her foot. Princess and had already returned to her own country. No one knew what she was busy with. Tang Zheng did not pay much attention to her in the first place. Naturally, he would not interfere. Thus, the people left in the room were all people who had intimate relations with Tang Zheng. Nana opened her eyes wide. She looked left and right. Although she was young, she was mischievous. She said something shocking. "Big brother, are you thinking of sleeping with someone?" Whoosh. Everyone's fair faces immediately turned red. Even Mu Hongyan's neck was red. Even though Tang Zheng's skin was thicker than the city walls, when he heard Wu Ji's childish words, his face was a little embarrassed. He touched his nose embarrassedly, not knowing how to reply. How did this child know so much these days? Everyone sighed in their hearts. They looked at Tang Zheng with a bit of blame in their eyes, as if to say, "Look, it's all because of your bad teachings." Mu Hongyan was even more embarrassed to stay. She hurriedly carried Nana and said, "Nana, children should not talk nonsense. You still have school tomorrow. I'll carry you to bed." With that, she looked around and met Tang Zheng's eyes. Obviously, she also wanted to be alone with Tang Zheng. However, because of her daughter's words, she could not stay any longer. She quickly carried Nan Nan up the stairs. Nan Nan laid on her mother's shoulder and pouted in grievance as she muttered, "Nan Nan didn't say anything wrong. You see, All the big sisters want to sleep with big brother. Nan Nan is very smart. Nana had received the teachings of the Empyrean fairy. She was already very different from ordinary children. Her pair of eyes seemed to be able to see through many things. For the latest novel updates, please visit the website. Chapter 1550. Nana and Mu Hongyan returned to their room while the others fell into an awkward situation. They looked at each other, but no one had the intention to return to their room. They had been separated from Tangzheng for too long, and it seemed that they really wanted to get closer to him. Fang Shishir, Yi Dingdang, Lu Qingmei Wu, and Li Xiaotian all looked at Tangzheng with sparkling eyes, as if their eyes could speak. Tangzheng patted his head. This was the first time. In the past, they were all very reserved and would not be so straightforward. It seemed that he had underestimated the competition between women. Without a doubt, the time that Tangzheng stayed at home was getting shorter and shorter. Everyone wanted to fight for themselves as much as possible. However, Tangzheng was only one person after all. He could not split himself, so how could he be absolutely fair? Aren't you guys going to rest? Tangzheng asked embarrassedly. Of course we need to rest. Yi Dingdang curled her lips, thinking that his question was unnecessary. Cough cough, then go back to your room and rest. Tangzheng coughed and said. But no one moved. Their eyes did not want to move away from him. Tangzheng had a headache. With so many people, how could he make a choice? Whoosh. He took a deep breath. He had to break this deadlock, but the problem was how to break it. Looking at these delicate beauties, he could only look at them without being able to eat them. The fire in his heart surged up with a whoosh. His pure yang energy had long been restless. If he had not deliberately suppressed it, it would have exploded long ago. At this moment, the women's pure yin energy had stirred up his pure yang energy, and there were signs of it exploding. Suddenly he had an idea. His eyes turned, and he clutched his chest. With a scream he fell onto the sofa. My pure yang energy exploded. Oh no, I'm dead for sure. He screamed. His cheeks turned red, and the redness reached his neck. It really did look like a sign of his pure yang energy exploding. Ignore him. He's lying to us. Yi Dingdang pursed her lips. Obviously, she wasn't going to be fooled. Fang Shishir's heart could not bear it. But just as she was about to open her mouth, there was someone who moved even faster. Lu Qingmei was like an arrow that left the bow, flying to Tangzheng's side. Ha! The others were dumbfounded. How could she be so fast? Lu Qingmei had seen the signs of Tangzheng's pure yang energy exploding. She knew that he was not faking it, so Tangzheng was in great danger. In addition, her status among the women was rather awkward. She did not have a presence, especially after Fang Shishir and Yi Dingdang formed a united front. As their former teacher, it was even harder for her to have a chance to interact with Tangzheng in private. At this moment, she couldn't help but be the first to act. The others were taken aback. When she rushed to Tangzheng's side, she realized that her movements were too fast. But there was no turning back. She resisted the burning cheeks and the shyness in her heart. She hugged Tangzheng and said, his body is so hot, like Luo Tai. It really is his pure yang energy exploding. In fact, Tangzheng wasn't completely acting. It was half true and half false. His pure yang energy really couldn't be suppressed anymore. I'll go dissolve his pure yang energy. She threw down a sentence, picked up Tangzheng, and flew up into the air. Like a butterfly, she flew up to the second floor. Bang! The door closed. Only a few people were left looking at each other. They were filled with regret. Why didn't they act so fast? She succeeded first. Yi Dingdang pouted and said, she's too cunning. She took advantage of the situation and snatched him away. The others felt the same. As expected of someone who had been a teacher, she was really smart and good at grasping people's psychology. Humph, next time I definitely won't let her take the lead. Yi Dingdang waved her fist, gritted her teeth, and said to Fang Shishir, Shishir, don't you think so? Fang Shishir's heart was filled with regret, but her face was still red. She helplessly rolled her eyes at Yi Dingdang and said, if you want to snatch him, then do it yourself. How could she say this kind of thing directly? Not to mention being shy. If others understood her intentions, then wouldn't the next time be snatched away by others? The few people resentfully dispersed. They couldn't really rush into Lu Qingmei's room and snatch Tang Jing out. That would be harder than pulling a tooth from a tiger's mouth. Moreover, there was probably a shameful scene inside. If they rushed in like this, it would be unbearable to look at. Thinking of that scene, the few people couldn't help but blush. Their minds rippled and a warm current seemed to surge out from the depths of their bodies. The few people had a tacit understanding and returned to their respective rooms without saying a word. But thinking of the scene in the room, no one could sleep. Tang Zheng's pure yang energy had indeed exploded. At the moment he deliberately pretended to give up a part of his resistance, the pure yang energy was like a volcanic eruption. It was no longer under his control, and completely submerged his body. Lu Qingmei had just carried him into the room when his clothes turned into flames and burned fiercely. She was very clear that this was a true explosion of pure yang energy. Back then, Tang Zheng was like this. But she didn't care about her own safety, and used her pure yin energy to help Umo get through the crisis. She secretly rejoiced that she had reacted in time. Otherwise, if she had delayed any longer, the consequences would have been unimaginable. She didn't even have time to take off her clothes before they were unconsciously torn off by Tang Zheng. In Tang Zheng's hands, no matter how tattered the clothes were, they were like a thin piece of paper, unable to withstand a single blow. Her clothes were in disarray and torn into strips. Her skin was half covered and half exposed, giving her a different kind of charm. Tang Zheng's eyes were red as he tightly wrapped her. Pure yin energy immediately seeped from her body into every pore of his. Ah, he cried out in comfort. The flames gradually extinguished, and he recovered a bit of his reason. Looking at Lu Qingmei's shy face, he said, "Sister Mei, it's been hard on you." Lu Qingmei glared at him and said, "You torturous little guy. You made me lose face in front of others." Her eyes were watery, as if she was coquettishly angry. How could Tang Jing endure such a scene? He immediately shouted and laughed evilly. "Torturous little guy? Humph, I see you still dare to say little. This isn't little anymore." "Ah!" Lu Qingmei tenderly cried out and quickly hugged his waist. Her cheeks were drunk red, as if water could drip out. She clenched her teeth and half closed her eyes. Her breath smelled like orchids, and she couldn't say another word. The temperature in the room rose rapidly. Lu Qingmei couldn't control her body. It was like dry earth being moisturized by rain. Her entire body becoming transparent. "Ah!" She couldn't help but cry out. Her voice wasn't soft at all, and it directly drilled through the crack in the door. Chapter 1551. Lu Qingmei was rarely this excited. It was as if her body did not belong to her anymore. She felt as if she was floating in the air, as if she was about to fly to the ninth heaven. She completely gave up on resisting. She was like 10,000 limpid autumn waters, allowing Tang Zheng to do whatever he wanted, changing into all kinds of embarrassing positions. She had never been so impudent before. The cries resounded throughout the villa, so she subconsciously knew that others would definitely hear them. However, since she had already taken the lead and carried him back to her room, then there was no need to deceive herself. Let's unrestrainedly release ourselves to our heart's content. She was happy, but the others were not happy at all. All kinds of feelings floated up in their hearts. Some people covered their ears with their blankets while others closed their eyes in an attempt to sleep. However, those sounds seemed to be everywhere. It was not something they could not hear even if they did not want to. Mu Hongyan did not know whether to laugh or cry. She thought to herself that young people were really having fun. Wasn't there still a child? "Mother, Sister Qingmei is calling. Did something happen?" Nana suddenly raised her head and asked curiously. Mu Hongyan hurriedly covered her daughter's ears and said, "Nana, be good. Eavesdropping on other people's conversations is not right. Quickly go to sleep." Oh. Nana seemed to understand, and immediately closed her eyes. Mu Hongyan did not want her daughter to be affected, so she hurriedly used her divine ability. An invisible barrier covered Nana, so no more sounds could disturb her. Not long after, Nana fell into a deep sleep. Aya, how could I forget this method? It's fine as long as we block out the sounds. Mu Hongyan slapped her head. She was not a normal person. Facing this powerless situation, she could completely block it out. However, just as she was about to use her technique, she could not help but stop. That sound seemed to have magic, causing ripples in her heart. She could not help but want to listen for a while longer. The others were in a similar situation as her. They all had a way to block out the sounds, but for some reason they did not do so. They secretly listened in the corner. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. But there was a sense of loss and emptiness in their hearts. Lu Qingmei was completely out of strength. She lay limply on the bed. Tang Zheng got down from her body and said with a mischievous smile, "Now you know how powerful I am? You dared to challenge me just now. Let's see if you still dare to do so in the future." Lu Qingmei's seductive eyes were like silk. A single look from her seemed to contain thousands of words, as if water was about to drip out. She exhaled and said, "You're so bad." Her jade-like hands couldn't help but touch his hard chest. "Aya, why is it still so hot? Have you not finished neutralizing your pure yang energy?" Lu Qingmei asked in surprise. "How long has it been? I've been accumulating pure yang energy for so long. How can it be neutralized so quickly?" Tang Zheng said with a mischievous smile. Seeing that he wasn't a teacher and was looking at her with a restless expression, Lu Qingmei hurriedly surrendered and said, "I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. You can go and harm other people." "How can that be? You started the fire, so you have to be responsible for extinguishing it." Tang Zheng's hands touched her again. "No, I'll help you call for help." Lu Qingmei hurriedly jumped off the bed. Her legs went soft, and she almost fell to the ground, which made Tang Zheng burst out laughing. Lu Qingmei coquettishly rolled her eyes at him, put on her pajamas and walked out. Tang Zheng spread his legs wide open like a Chinese character. He lay comfortably on the bed, reminiscing about the wonderful moment just now. Thinking about it, his pure yang energy began to stir again. Creak. The door opened. Tang Zheng blurted out, "Why aren't you running anymore? Come back obediently and accept my pure yang fire." "Ah." Just as he finished speaking, he cried out in shock and almost jumped up from the bed. He looked at the person at the door and said, "Sister Mu, why are you here?" Mu Hongyan stood at the door, her face red. She felt that this was incomparably absurd. Since she was young, she had never done such an absurd thing. But there was a voice in her heart that incited her. So what if it was absurd once? If she missed this opportunity, then wouldn't other people seize the opportunity first? Thinking back to when Lu Qingmei sneaked into her room and said those words to her, her ears turned red. Lu Qingmei actually asked her to extinguish the fire. As the saying goes, keep the goodies within the family. Lu Qingmei and Mu Hongyan usually spent a lot of time in the company. They were colleagues and gradually became good sisters. Therefore, Lu Qingmei left such a good thing for her. Mu Hongyan wanted to refuse, but her body was very honest. There was no way for her to refuse. She was wearing a silk nightgown, which was faintly discernible. It made people's imagination run wild. She curled her lips and rebuked. "Why can't I come? Are you not satisfied and want to change to someone else?" "No, no." Tang Zheng quickly denied. Mu Hongyan glanced at him flirtatiously and said, "Even if you want to change, I won't give you the chance." Seeing her walk to the bedside, Tang Zheng hugged her willowy waist, turned over and pressed her on the bed, chuckling. "How could I want to change people? I haven't doted on Sister Mu for a long time." "Don't call me Sister Mu. It makes me sound old." Mu Hongyan put away her usual cold and aloof appearance in the company. Her hands hooked around his neck, her charming eyes like silk. Her red lips slightly opened, and her voice was soft and sweet as she said, "Call me Hongyan." "Good, my good Hongyan. You are really a femme fatale." Tang Zheng lifted her chin and teased. "You are the one who is a femme fatale. You are a femme fatale." Mu Hongyan met his gaze and said provocatively. In an instant, the room rang out again. It seemed that because there was a precedent, Mu Hongyan did not control herself. Her voice was louder than Lu Qingmei's. This was like a declaration of sovereignty. He was not only someone else's but also hers. The others thought that they could sleep. Although their hearts were fluctuating, they still forced themselves to sleep. Otherwise, it would not be beautiful if they had panda eyes tomorrow. However, after a while, the sound rang out again. Could it be that they are fighting again? Many people had a strange feeling in their hearts. No, this is not Lu Qingmei's voice. It seems to be Mu Hongyan's voice. Why is she with him? Many people had the idea of favoring one and discriminating against the other. It was fine that Lu Qingmei made the first move, but why was Mu Hongyan also involved? What about them? Many people really wanted to rush out and question Tang Zheng, but when they thought of the scene they might encounter, they could not help but stop. They could only continue to eavesdrop in the corner. They had never felt that a night would be so long. They tossed and turned, and some even directly sat up. Some tried to practice to pass the time, but when they heard the sound, their true qi almost went astray. If they continued to practice, they were afraid that they would be possessed by the devil. Humph, this heartless thing. Everyone fiercely cursed Tang Zheng in their hearts, but they could not hide the faint sense of loss in their hearts as they looked towards the door anxiously. To read a novel, please visit Chapter 1552. Tang Zheng looked at Lu Qingmei, who was lying limp on the bed. He carefully examined the pure yang energy in his body. It was clear that his realm had increased too much and his cultivation had increased too quickly. The corresponding pure yang energy had also erupted too quickly. After tossing and turning for half the night, the pure yang energy was still not completely neutralized. It could even be said that half of it had not been neutralized. No, I can't leave behind any hidden dangers. In addition, with such a big commotion just now, if I do it carelessly, I'm afraid other people will have opinions. I won't be able to have a good time tomorrow. He patted his chest and glanced at his lower body. Brother, I'll have to trouble you then. Mu Hongyan looked like she was drunk as she half closed her eyes in satisfaction. Seeing Tang Zheng mumbling to himself as he got off the bed, she lazily asked, "What are you going to do?" Hey, of course I'm going to do something good. You should rest well," Tang Zheng said with a mischievous smile. Mu Hongyan looked at his smiling face and knew he was up to no good. However, her body was weak and she was too lazy to care about him. She comfortably laid down. Tang Zheng's clothes had already been burnt to a crisp. He looked at his naked body. Since there were no outsiders in the villa, and he wasn't afraid of being seen in the middle of the night, he simply swaggered out. Half asleep and half awake, Mu Hongyan heard another cry. She thought it was a dream, so she turned around and said in a daze, "Even dreams are not peaceful. AI, that little guy is too torturous." Suddenly her eyes flew open, her gaze fixed on the outside. That cry became exceptionally clear. He finally knew that this was not a dream but reality. She instantly understood why Tang Zheng had sneaked out. Suddenly, she said in embarrassment and anxiousness, "This guy actually went to another room. He's really not afraid of spraining his waist. AI whatever. I can't be biased. At least he has a little conscience." After experiencing a fierce battle, her body was weak and her eyelids were heavy. She simply did not want to think about this ridiculous guy and fell asleep. That night was truly absurd. No one had ever been so absurd before. The screams only stopped when the sun was about to rise. In the end, Tang Zheng was chased out of Li Xiaoyan's room. He had no choice. He was the last one to go to her room, and he had made her wait for him all night. Naturally, he was angry. Although Li Xiaotian was usually obedient to her and obeyed her orders in the company, when men and women were in bed, how could they still follow the company rules? Li Xiaotian naturally recovered her feminine side. Moreover, Li Xiaotian had practiced the art of seduction before, so her skills in that aspect were much better than others. She allowed Tang Zheng to try many things that he had never done before, making him enjoy himself so much that he forgot to return. Fortunately, his body was stronger than most people's, and he also had a divine technique to protect his body. Otherwise, he would have lost half of his life after such a night of torment. Even so, when he finally left Li Xiaoyan's room, his legs were a little weak, and he staggered back to his room. He did not sleep, but cultivated. Cultivating was a better way to recover than sleeping. After the pure yang energy was neutralized, the circulation of his true qi was exceptionally smooth, and all kinds of divine abilities were used freely. His body recovered very quickly. By the time the sun rose to the middle of the sky, he had completely recovered. He was full of vigor, and could fight for another 300 rounds. When he opened the door, he found that only Nana and Linger were playing in the living room. The others had not woken up yet. Aya. Tang Zheng suddenly slapped his head. He had actually forgotten about the two of them. He had caused such a big commotion, and it would be a great sin if it affected their minds. However, fortunately, they did not look at him strangely, so he was slightly relieved. Of course, Linger had heard those voices. Although she was inexperienced, she had struggled in the entertainment industry for so long, so how could she not understand what was going on? However, she was not surprised at all because in her heart, her master was high and mighty, omnipotent. To be able to be with him, that was a supreme honor and luck. She could not help but envy them in her heart. Tang Zheng consciously went to the kitchen to make a table of delicious food. They had exhausted themselves in the battle last night, and needed to be well nourished. When the sun was high in the sky, the others gradually woke up. Each of them looked radiant and beautiful. They looked at each other, and hurriedly turned their heads away. The shyness in their eyes could not be concealed. After this battle, everyone's relationship was truly laid out on the table. If the eldest brother did not say anything, then no one would say anything. Especially when they saw that Tang Zheng had made a table of food, a sweet feeling emerged in their hearts. It was unknown if the others were aware of this and deliberately created an environment for them, but no one came to the villa for the whole morning. After lunch, Linger left. She had to go back to work. She had the potential to be a workaholic. Tian Chanzi also came. He looked at him meaningfully, then swept his gaze over the others and said in a low voice, "You must be tired from last night." Tang Zheng patted his body and said, "Do I look tired to you? Young man, even if your body is good, you should take it easy. At that time, you still righteously rejected my suggestion. Now, aren't you doing it? You are a celestial with a 9-yang saint body. This is your fate. You should accept it," Tian Chanzi said. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and inwardly sighed, saying in his heart that the capable should do more work. Since this is my life, then I can only accept it. If other men heard these words, they would definitely want to chop him to death. They also wanted to accept their fate, but they did not have this fortune. When the others heard the two of them muttering, they fiercely glared at Heaven Monk. They were old and disrespectful, one old and one young, neither of them were old things. Cough cough. Tian Chanzi coughed twice. He seemed to have recovered his seriousness and said, "The spring festival is coming. We should try to settle the matter in Dianan before the spring festival." Tang Zheng nodded. He also had this intention. "Then we should find a day to leave as soon as possible. What are we waiting for? Can't we do it today? Don't tell me you are too tired and have no energy?" Tian Chanzi looked him up and down and mischievously asked. "Nonsense, how could I have no energy?" His energy had indeed recovered. After neutralizing the pure yang energy and cultivating, he had already recovered to his peak state. Moreover, he did not need to worry about the pure yang energy erupting. This was the best time to fight. "Then don't dawdle," Tian Chanzi urged. "We also want to go." Hearing this, the other women all stopped what they were doing and looked at Umo with burning eyes, volunteering to do it. "I also want to go." Nana heard the two words Dianan. That was her hometown, so she also raised her head. Her eyes were firm and did not allow anyone to refuse. To read the latest novel without error, please visit Chapter 1553. Everyone wanted to go to Dianan and help Tang Zheng. However, this was unrealistic. In the end, Mu Hongyan and Nana were approved to go together. Other than them, even Li Xiaotian did not have this opportunity. After she took control of the Li Palace, she had taken several risks with Tang Zheng. In order to balance the relationship between the women, Tang Zheng could not allow her to go together. Otherwise, the others would definitely have objections. This trip to Dianan was extremely dangerous. Tang Zheng did not want them to take the risk. In the end, they talked until their mouths were dry, and Umo did not agree to anyone else. Tian Chanzi naturally could not go. There must be a general in the family. After the Empyrean fairy left, Tian Chanzi became the most suitable candidate. The others were unhappy. There was nothing they could do even if they went. They could only hold back their energy and hope that their cultivation would improve faster. Only then would they have the opportunity to help him and not be a burden. In addition, there were also the four symbols, Azura, and Thundercloud Beast traveling with him. He would not ignore these generals. After Little White left, these few divine beasts did not seem to be in high spirits and were sullen. Therefore, Tang Zheng planned to use battle to stimulate them. Especially the Thundercloud Beast. It was the first mythological beast to follow him. Although it was due to Xiao Bai's face at the beginning, now it had sincerely pledged allegiance to Tang Zheng. On the somersault cloud, Tang Zheng, Mu Hongyan, and Nana stood on the clouds and looked down. Nana was extremely excited. She kept jumping up and down, as if she wanted to test whether this marshmallow-like somersault cloud was elastic or not. The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth hung a shallow smile as he watched her mischief. Mu Hongyan advised her a few times, but Nan Nan did not listen. It was as if she knew that Tang Zheng was her backer, and would comply with her every wish. Tang Zheng also really loved this little girl. During this period of time, he really didn't accompany her properly. She had grown a lot taller and more beautiful. Mu Hongyan helplessly said, "Just give in to her. When the time comes and she develops all kinds of bad habits, I will find you to settle the score." Tang Zheng lovingly stroked Nana's hair and said, "She's so obedient. How could she have any bad habits? Don't worry too much." Mu Hongyan smiled knowingly. She knew her daughter very well. She had been well-behaved and sensible since she was a child. Especially after she recovered from her illness, she often helped Mu Hongyan do what she could. She also said that her mother used to take care of her too hard, and now she wanted to repay her filial piety. Mu Hongyan was moved to tears. "Will I be able to see Grandpa when I go back this time?" Nana asked expectantly with her big, sparkling eyes. Ever since the mother and daughter broke off with the Long family, they had never returned to the Long family in Dianan. Naturally, they had never seen Long Xianyuan again. Hearing this, Mu Hongyan's expression became unnatural. If there was anyone in the huge Long family that they would still miss, it would only be Long Xianyuan. Back then, Long Xianyuan treated them quite well, especially doting on Nan Nan. It was a pity that he did not truly fulfill his responsibility as the head of the family, and allowed his youngest son to repeatedly harass and target the mother and daughter. Therefore, Mu Hongyan still had a knot in her heart. Mu Hongyan glanced at Tang Zheng. This matter was not something she could decide. Tang Zheng patted his head. He had actually forgotten a very important matter. Back then, in order to sow discord between Ji Wuxiang and Qi Yu, he had transformed into Qi Yu and shattered Long Xuanyuan's dantian. Later, he forgot to tell Mu Hongyan. Now that she mentioned it, he remembered again. There's something I haven't told you yet." "What is it?" "It's about Nana's grandfather." Mu Hongyan's heart tightened. She knew that Ji Wuxiang had chosen Dianan as his base camp. It must be inextricably linked to the Long family. Could it be that Long Xianyuan had encountered an accident? "What is it?" "His dantian was shattered by me and he became an ordinary person." Tang Zheng hesitated for a moment, but still revealed the truth. Mu Hongyan heaved a sigh of relief. So that was the case. This was much better than she had imagined, although she also knew what a shattered dantian meant to a martial artist. But what was wrong with being an ordinary person? At least he could keep his life and not get involved in Ji Wuxiang's matters. He could live a quiet life and spend his old age in peace. With the wealth of the Long family, it was not difficult for him to be a rich man in his old age. Mu Hongyan pondered for a long time and said, "This is the best ending for him." "It's good that you understand. I had no choice," Tang Zheng explained. Mu Hongyan squeezed out a smile, held his hand openly and said, "I know your difficulties. Since I am already by your side, I will naturally think for you. The past is already a thing of the past, and I don't want to think about it anymore. Nana was a cultivator, so she did not know what a shattered dantian meant. She was only immersed in her own world, alive and kicking. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew over, and a figure flew to the front of the somersault cloud. Thundercloud Beast. Master, we are about to reach the border of Dianan. There are no abnormalities for the time being. The Thundercloud Beast reported. The Thundercloud Beast took the lead and flew to the front to investigate the situation. Don't go, stay by our side. We are about to enter the border of Dianan. Although we are in the sky, the celestial chest covers the sky and the earth. We may not be able to escape Ji Wuxiang's eyes. The Thundercloud Beast rubbed its fists. It had not exercised its muscles and bones for too long, and it could not wait to fight. After flying for a while, they had truly entered the border of Dianan. In the distance, there were hundreds of thousands of mountains that rose and fell one after another. It was almost impossible to see the end at a glance. That place carried too many memories of Tang Zheng and the Thundercloud Beast. He could not help but look into the distance. After a while he slowly withdrew his gaze and fell on the city under his feet. The terrain of Dianan was complicated, and the mountains rose and fell. As a result, the city was built on the mountains and was not orderly. Hey, why has Dianan changed so much? Suddenly Mu Hongyan said in surprise, staring at the city under her feet. Why do you say that? Although Tang Zheng had come to Dianan several times, he had not carefully observed the city. Mu Hongyan had lived in the city since she was a child, so naturally, she knew more about it than him. Mu Hongyan pointed to a huge flat ground not far away and said, There used to be a museum. It was quite large, but now it is gone. Her eyes turned, and she pointed to another place and said, There used to be a government department. A very magnificent office building was built there, but now it is gone. Mu Hongyan pointed out a few more places. Anyway, it was very different from the Dianan in her memory. There had been earth-shaking changes. A person's memory would not have such a big mistake. The only explanation was that Dianan had really been turned upside down, and it was no longer the Dianan of the past. Tang Zheng believed in Mu Hongyan's judgment, and looked in the direction of her finger. Gradually, his expression became dignified. To read a novel, please visit Chapter 1554. Tang Zheng's expression was solemn as he gradually saw through the clues. If the huge southern Yunnan was treated as a chessboard, then the places that Mu Hongyan pointed out were a few key nodes. Pulling one would affect the whole body, which was extremely important to the celestial chess. He suddenly realized, no wonder there was such a huge change. Ji Wuxiang has already treated the entire southern Yunnan as a big chessboard and set up a huge celestial chess. Those few points are the places where changes or sacrifices must be made. He was extremely shocked. It seemed that Ji Wuxiang had already completely controlled southern Yunnan. Southern Yunnan had already become a country within a country, his independent kingdom. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to complete so many things in such a short period of time. He's really going all out. Is he going to stay in southern Yunnan and not leave? Although this was a big deal, it could only affect southern Yunnan and had little impact on other places. However, when Tang Zheng looked at the 100,000 mountains not far away, he knew the meaning of Ji Wuxiang's move. Southern Yunnan was backed by the 100,000 mountains, and it was not a small place. Once the city and the 100,000 mountains were used as a huge chessboard, under the effect of the celestial chess, it was completely possible to use a fulcrum to pry open the entire country. At that time, he could really rely on southern Yunnan to affect other places. When he thought of this, he stared at the 100,000 mountains with bright eyes. He did not know if he did not look, but when he looked he was shocked. He and the Thundercloud Beast had both overlooked one point. The 100,000 mountains seemed to have changed as well. Thundercloud Beast, look at the 100,000 mountains. He hurriedly shouted. The Thundercloud Beast looked over, and after a while, its eyes bulged. It had lived in the prehistoric heavenly tomb for so many years, so it was very familiar with that area. Now that it looked over there, dark clouds covered the area, and a huge flat ground seemed to have appeared on the ground. Without a doubt, that was definitely Ji Wuxiang's doing. The man and beast looked at each other. There was no need to say anything. They already understood each other's thoughts. Tang Zheng's face was as gloomy as water as he said, "It seems that we still underestimated Ji Wuxiang. The speed of his actions is far beyond our imagination." Ji Wuxiang had already extended his evil claws to the 100,000 mountains. In other words, what he had already done, or was currently doing, could completely multiply the power of heavenly chess, to the point where he could use a single point to move an entire country. In addition, there was also Mount Buzhou in the 100,000 mountains. Yan Qingyi had once predicted that Mount Buzhou would be the key to the end of the world. Could it be that the apocalypse was related to Ji Wuxiang? Tang Zheng was very clear about the power of the heavenly chess. Once the heavenly chess went out of control, he was not sure if it would lead to the end of the world. After hearing their words, Mu Hongyan also realized the seriousness of the matter and said, "Then what should we do next?" Tang Zheng retracted his gaze from the 100,000 mountains and said, "Then let's go to the 100,000 mountains first." Mu Hongyan thought for a moment, then shook her head and said, "Things have developed to such a serious point. We must cut the Gordian knot and disrupt the enemy's pace as soon as possible. Therefore, I think it would be more effective to divide the troops into two groups." Mu Hongyan managed a company with so many people, so naturally, she had her own opinions and judgment. Therefore, her words touched Tang Zheng's heart. However, Tang Zheng still refused without hesitation. "It's too dangerous." The danger was not to Tang Zheng, but to Mu Hongyan and Nana. Mu Hongyan was very clear about this. However, if she always lived under the protection of Tang Zheng and let him shelter her from the wind and rain, would she be helping him or dragging him down? This time, she set a goal for herself, that was she must not drag him down. If he was dragged down because of her when they just arrived in Dianan, she would rather go back. Nana and I are not powerless to protect ourselves. Moreover, we were born and raised here. You are all familiar with it. Therefore, if there is really danger, we will escape. There will always be a place for us to hide in the streets and alleys." Mu Hongyan said persistently. Nana also nodded seriously. "Brother, I have grown up. I will protect my mother well, and won't let outsiders hurt her. You can rest assured." Obviously, the little fellow was also very confident. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He touched her head and said, "What are you doing here?" Nana pouted and said, "I'm not here to join in the fun. I'm here to help." Tang Zheng understood Mu Hongyan. Once she made a decision, he certainly could not change it. Moreover, her words were very persuasive. "Well, but the Thundercloud Beast must follow you and protect your safety. Thundercloud Beast, do you hear me? You must protect their safety." Tang Zheng solemnly exhorted. The Thundercloud Beast flapped its wings a few times and said, "Master, you can rest assured. If anything happens to them, you can hold me responsible. In addition, if there is really danger, hide and protect yourself first. This is the most important thing." Tang Zheng held Nana in one hand and Mu Hongyan in the other. Mu Hongyan nodded meekly and said with a smile, "I know. Wow, Nana is finally going to beat the bad guys. I'm so happy." Nana was in high spirits. She suddenly jumped up and kissed Tang Zheng on the face. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. "Nana, you sneak attacked me. Hee hee." Nana smiled even more brilliantly. Her two little dimples were round and beautiful. She tugged at Mu Hongyan's hand and said, "Mother, I already kissed Big Brother. You should kiss him too." "Kiss me too?" Mu Hongyan's face immediately turned red. This was really her own daughter. "Yes, I have to kiss him. This is to give Big Brother the courage to fight. It's always like this in the movies," Nana said in a serious tone. Mu Hongyan rolled her eyes. What kind of lousy movie was that? She would definitely not watch it in the future. She could not continue to poison her daughter. However, she could not dissuade her daughter. She leaned over and kissed Tang Zheng on the face. Although she did not stop, the two's hearts trembled slightly. They looked at each other with eyes full of deep affection. "Thank you, Nana. Then I will also give you courage." Tang Zheng deduced many things from one example. He kissed Nana on the face, and then affectionately kissed Mu Hongyan on the lips. Mu Hongyan was shocked as if she had been electrocuted. She stared blankly at him. Her white cheeks turned red, directly to her ears. It was sweet and shy. Oh, Big Brother gave us courage. We are filled with courage. Thundercloud Beast, hurry up. Let's fly down. Nana jumped onto the Thundercloud Beast. The Thundercloud Beast immediately grew bigger and carried her. Mu Hongyan and Tang Zheng's hands were still tightly held together. They were reluctant to part. Their eyes met, filled with affection. Mu Hongyan gently said, "You must be careful. You must take care of yourself. Don't try to be brave. You too. With my current cultivation, it will not be easy for Ji Wuxiang to hurt me," Tang Zheng said confidently. Chapter 1555. 100,000 Great Mountains, revisiting old places, gave birth to many emotions. The miasma from back then had long since disappeared. In the distance was the homeland of the Witch clan. It had long been destroyed in the Great War, leaving behind only a mess. In front of him was the Witch clan's holy land. Xiaobai was born here, but because of the volcanic eruption his appearance had long changed. Memories gushed out from the bottom of Tang Zheng's heart like spring water. Along the way, he saw a few places razed to the ground. Lakes were filled in, mountains were pushed down, and towering trees were cut down. Everything seemed to be far from what he remembered. Tang Zheng's heart gradually turned cold, and he muttered to himself, "Ji Wuxiang is really crazy to set up such a huge chess game." Back then, the heavenly chess that Ji Wuxiang had set up in the capital seemed vast, but in reality, it could only be considered an experimental version. Now the heavenly chess had merged with Dianan and the 100,000 Great Mountains, and its area was vast, extending to the end of the horizon, causing one to feel a deep sense of shock. If anyone else saw this scene, they would definitely rush down and destroy the nodes of the heavenly chess. However, Tang Zheng understood the heavenly chess very well, and knew that these nodes were just minor details. There was nothing to worry about, and even if they were destroyed, it would not affect the entire game. He had already deduced according to the heavenly chess, and confirmed that two places were the core of the heavenly chess. One was Dianan City, and the other was the prehistoric heavenly tomb. One in the east and one in the west, they were the head and tail of each other, echoing each other from afar. This was the true core node of the heavenly chess. Therefore, his target was the prehistoric heavenly tomb. The prehistoric heavenly tomb was already in sight. The aura inside was constantly changing, like the center of a storm, but also like another world. As expected, Tang Zheng's eyes lit up, confirming his guess. Whiz! Suddenly, a sound of something tearing through the air silently approached, interrupting Tang Zheng's thoughts. A sharp force shot over from below, heading straight for the somersault cloud. Tang Zheng stood on the somersault cloud. Looking down, it was just an ordinary cloud. Of course, other than the fact that its flying speed was a little fast. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank. He thought to himself that the other party really couldn't hold back anymore, and actually took the initiative to attack. He didn't think that he had gone deep into the 100,000 Great Mountains without being discovered by the heavenly chess. Although he was well versed in the heavenly chess and could use some rules to avoid detection, it was impossible for him to remain undiscovered for a long time. If that was the case, then Ji Wuxiang was too weak. Tang Zheng lowered his head to take a look. It was a beam of light that had already arrived below the somersault cloud. Whoosh! A beam of sword light flew out of his hand and easily struck the invading enemy. There was a loud explosion, and everything was calm again. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, the calm didn't last for too long. Numerous sounds of the air being torn apart arrived unexpectedly like a violent storm slapping the ground, covering the sky and covering the sun. Interesting. It was actually a rain of arrows. The strangest thing was that every arrow had a trace of the power of the stars on it. Tang Zheng glanced at the sky and found another clue. The sky above the 100,000 Great Mountains was actually different from the sky elsewhere. Ordinary people couldn't see the difference, but Tang Zheng could. Although it was broad daylight and the sun was shining brightly in the sky, there were actually faint glimmers of the stars. This is the effect of the heavenly chess. The heavenly chess absorbed the power of the stars, and martial artists could already absorb the power of the stars. Therefore, the power of the stars in Dianan was especially abundant. When Tang Jun entered Dianan, he realized this. Especially when he went deep into the 100,000 great mountains, this feeling was especially strong. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth had become very scarce. Instead, the power of the stars was increasing. Suddenly he realized a key point. The less spiritual energy there was, the more it would limit a cultivator's strength. Once the spiritual energy was completely gone, then once a cultivator was exhausted, he would not be able to replenish his true qi. Ji Wuxiang's plan is really too good. Once there is no spiritual energy in Dianan, then this place will become his independent kingdom. Only his warriors can cultivate to their heart's content and increase their strength, and the only threat is the cultivators. However, cultivators can't fight in Dianan for too long, then he will truly be in an invincible position. The more Tang Jun thought about it, the more shocked he became. Ji Wuxiang could definitely fight steadily step by step, and then use Dianan as a stronghold to expand outward step by step. In the end, the entire country and even the world would become like this, and then the cultivators would no longer have a place to live. Without spiritual energy, it would be a disaster for cultivators, but ordinary people would not be affected. Warriors would become high and mighty, and they would have to submit to Ji Wuxiang. A few hundred years ago, Nuera expelled the cultivators to the sky beyond heaven, allowing the warriors to become the top group. Now that the cultivators have returned, the advantages of the warriors have disappeared. I never thought that there would be another Ji Wuxiang. He was even smarter than Nuera, and even more capable. He actually came up with such a method. He didn't even need to expel the cultivators, he could just kill them all. Tang Jun was previously worried about the end of the world, but now he didn't have the mood to worry about this. Furthermore, he wasn't sure if his guess was correct. However, one thing was certain, if he did not stop Ji Wuxiang, then the end of the world of cultivators would definitely come early. The Azure Dragon Palace Hall was created by Nuera, and Ji Wuxiang was Nuera's successor. What happened hundreds of years ago was repeated in another way. I will definitely not let history repeat itself. Ji Wuxiang, I will definitely destroy your scheme. Tang Jun silently strengthened his conviction. So. The rain of arrows had already arrived in front of him, and the mysterious hidden sword flew up. Shwa shwa shwa, rays of sword light shot out, dazzling and dazzling, like fireworks, instantly blocking the somersault cloud. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The sword light spun, and unexpectedly met the rain of arrows. Boom boom boom, continuous explosions resounded through the sky, spreading throughout the 10,000 huge mountains. Immediately, the scene in the prehistoric heavenly tomb changed. The aura became more and more chaotic, and it was truly like the eye of a storm, causing people to tremble in fear. Tang Jun stared straight at this scene, completely ignoring the endless rain of arrows, and shouted, "Somersault cloud, go!" The somersault cloud's speed increased, and it was not afraid of the rain of arrows at all. The rain of arrows was completely blocked by the sword light, and was unable to take even half a step into the lightning pool. Halt! The rain of arrows was ineffective, and the martial warriors below could no longer remain calm. They all rose into the air and flew. Although they were martial warriors, ever since they absorbed the power of the stars, everything had undergone a tremendous change. Not only had their strength increased, flying in the air was no longer exclusive to cultivators. More than 10 martial warriors blocked Tang Jun's path forward. Tang Jun stood in the clouds and looked at them, not even wanting to say a word. Shwa. The hidden mystic sword swung out calmly, and the sword light cut through more than 10 people. They didn't even have time to scream, and fell from the sky one after another. The rain of arrows that covered the sky seemed to have lost its support, and fell from the sky. To read a novel without mistakes, please visit Chapter 1556. With the obstacles removed, the somersault cloud flew into the prehistoric heavenly tomb like a ray of light. The pursuers soared into the air from the ground, but were left behind. The prehistoric heavenly tomb was already surrounded by a strong storm. Tang Jun was inside and immediately realized the problem. and couldn't help but exclaim, "There's no more heaven and earth spirit chi here?" Yes, the heaven and earth spirit chi in the prehistoric heavenly tomb had already disappeared, leaving only the surging power of the stars. The power of the stars above the 9 heavens had all gathered here. The storm-like scene was completely caused by a large amount of star power. Fortunately, Hongyan and the rest didn't come. Otherwise, there would be no way to fight normally here. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice. Mu Hongyan's unintentional action was actually a blessing. This place is completely useless to other cultivators, but it's too useful to me. It's as if it's tailor-made for me. Ji Wuxiang never thought that I would take the risk and come to this prehistoric heavenly tomb. Humph, I want to absorb all the star power. Tang Zheng immediately activated his power, extended his hand, and the vast and mighty power of the stars entered through the pores of his fingers. In an instant, the aura of heaven and earth became more and more berserk, and the power of the stars gathered towards him from all directions. How dare you! Suddenly, an explosive roar came from the center of the storm. Then, a ray of light shot out from the eye of the storm. There was no sound, not even the sound of air being torn apart. It was very different from the rain of arrows that filled the sky. However, the biggest difference was in power. The power of this ray of light was many times greater than the rain of arrows. Tang Zheng had no choice but to stop. The speed of the light was too fast. In a moment of desperation, he could only hold the mysterious hidden sword horizontally in front of his chest. The sword light filled the sky, transforming into a screen of light, blocking the front of the somersault cloud. Boom! The ray of light struck the sword light. The sword light trembled intensely a few times before completely shattering, turning into specks of light that dissipated. However, Tang Zheng had already prepared his next move. With a shake of the hidden sword, he became one with the sword and flew out from the somersault cloud, slashing at the eye of the storm. As they approached the eye of the storm, they immediately saw a figure within it. This person was none other than Ji Wuxiang. He was surrounded by layers and layers of astral energy, appearing extremely mysterious and invincible. Ji Wuxiang's gaze swept over, causing the hearts of those who saw it to tremble. He immediately locked onto Tang Zheng and said in shock and anger, "Tang Zheng, you actually dared to come here and throw away your life. In that case, I will fulfill your wish." In the battle of the capital city, Ji Wuxiang had returned in defeat. It was a great regret, but it was also a great humiliation. Since Tang Zheng had rushed over, it was the perfect time for him to take his revenge. He grabbed out with his hand, and a surge of astral energy was firmly grasped in his palm. More and more star force gathered, and finally, it turned into a whip that was completely condensed out of star force. Whoosh! The long whip lashed across the sky, tearing the void and splitting the sky into two. Then the whip fell in front of Tang Zheng. The air in front of him was immediately split into two as well. A majestic force covered the sky and earth, and it was exceptionally fierce. A soul-stirring pressure arose spontaneously, but Tang Zheng did not retreat. Instead, he became one with the hidden sword and pressed forward with an indomitable will. Poof! The hidden mystic sword landed on the whip, and the whip trembled a little, completely blocking the impact. The long whip took the opportunity to coil around the hidden sword, and a huge force seemed to want to break the hidden sword in half. One with the sword, "Humph! I will destroy both you and the sword." Ji Wuxiang's angry voice came. The hidden sword seemed to be really about to break from the pressure. If the hidden sword broke into two pieces, Tang Zheng would be seriously injured even if he did not die. However, Wang, a clear sound of the sword soared into the sky. It was like a clear sound that shook the world, sweeping away all demons and ghosts. Pa! The sword light illuminated the surroundings, and with a momentum that could cut through everything, it broke free from the long whip. The long whip broke, and at the same time, the storm seemed to be split into two by the hidden sword. The hidden sword stopped in midair, and Tang Zheng appeared. The power of the sword was not small, and the power of the whip was not weak either. In the strong confrontation, the hidden sword won and broke the long whip. However, Tang Zheng had no choice but to separate from the hidden sword and reappear. The storm was completely stopped because of the sword. Ji Wuxiang stood not far away, and looked at Tang Zheng. He could not hide the shock in his eyes. Your cultivation. How did it increase so much? Ji Wuxiang thought that after that battle, he learned from the painful experience, and with the help of the celestial chess, his cultivation increased by leaps and bounds, and had undergone a tremendous change. This was already a miracle. However, Tang Zheng's cultivation had also increased by leaps and bounds, and was not lower than his at all. In fact, it seemed that he had even surpassed him. One must know that the whip just now had borrowed the power of the celestial chess, and its power was even stronger than what he could use himself. However, Tang Zheng still broke it. Although there was a price, it was far lower than what Ji Wuxiang expected. How did you do it? Ji Wuxiang asked in a stern voice. Tang Zheng could not see through Ji Wuxiang's cultivation. Ever since he used the power of the stars to cultivate, Tang Zheng could not see through him. Once other martial artists absorbed the power of the stars, the cultivator could not see through the cultivation of the martial artist. In this way, both sides could not see through each other's cultivation. It was like a blind man touching an elephant, and could only know who was stronger and who was weaker after fighting. Humph, you think only you can become stronger, and others can only stay where they are? Tang Zheng asked with a cold smile. So what if I become stronger? You are already in my celestial chess. What else can you do? Ji Wuxiang asked disdainfully. Have you forgotten? I also understand the celestial chess. You stole a bit of knowledge of the celestial chess from me, and you dare to show off in front of me? You are the one who should not forget that the celestial chess was created by me. It is like my child, and everything about it was given by me. If I want it to change, it will naturally change. You don't really think that I would not consider you as a factor, right? Tang Zheng's eyes narrowed slightly and he asked, What do you mean? Haha, I am not afraid to tell you directly. The celestial chess has already changed, and is not the celestial chess you know. Moreover, I have specially prepared a gift for you. Ji Wuxiang said maliciously, the ruthlessness in his eyes growing stronger and stronger. Tang Zheng's head trembled. Ji Wuxiang was really cunning and farsighted. After thinking so much, he had actually specially prepared a gift for him. This gift was naturally a trap. However, he was skilled and daring, and was not afraid. Instead, he held his sword with one hand and walked on air as if he was walking on flat ground, walking step by step towards Ji Wuxiang. I want to see what you have prepared for me, he said casually. Chapter 1557. The storm rose again, and it was even more violent than before. It covered the sky and completely enveloped Tang Zheng. Every step Tang Zheng took seemed to be extremely heavy, but even so his pace did not slow down in the slightest. He was extremely steady. Swish. Sword light rose, and heaven and earth merged. Tang Zheng knew very well how powerful Ji Wuxiang's attack was, so he did not dare to be sloppy and directly used his most powerful move. Heaven and earth merging. The power of this move when he fought against Hao Tianwang was still fresh in Tang Zheng's memory. Practice makes perfect. When his sword light rose, heaven and earth changed color. The storm in the surroundings became more violent and turbulent, layer upon layer, and the power of each layer quickly superimposed. At the same time, the sky seemed to be pulled down, and a terrifying pressure was exerted. The yin-yang fish also appeared in the sky and on the ground. They moved up and down, and quickly closed together, making this pressure even more terrifying. The storm was completely enveloped by the yin-yang fish, and even Ji Wuxiang could not stay out of it. He looked up, and then looked down again. His eyes were as deep as water, and he thought to himself, this brat's strength has really reached the peak. He's actually so powerful. Heavenly chess break. Ji Wuxiang roared. Above the 9 heavens, in the land beyond the heavens, the stars kept flickering, and the power of the stars rapidly descended. Thousands upon thousands of them fell like a meteor shower. The heavenly chess was immediately infused with a vast amount of star power. The windstorm grew rapidly with an unstoppable momentum, blocking the yin-yang fish that were closing in. The yin-yang fish actually retreated. Tang Zheng's expression darkened. He did not expect the heavenly chess to change so much that it could actually withstand the attack of heaven and earth merging. Ha ha ha, Tang Zheng, you overestimate yourself. You dare to embarrass yourself in front of me with this little trick? You're asking to be humiliated. Ji Wuxiang was exultant, and he could not stop laughing. Tang Zheng did not say a word. He deeply felt the power of the stars, and also found the problem. All of this was caused by the stars. Without the power of the stars, the power of the heavenly chess would be greatly reduced. Then I'll make your star force vanish. Tang Zheng urged his power and quickly absorbed the power of the stars. The vast and mighty power of the stars seemed to have found an outlet, and all of a sudden, it converged towards him from all directions. Every pore on his body was stretched to the maximum. The power of the stars was rapidly accumulating in his body, and he didn't have time to convert it into true qi. Soon, his body reached a state of saturation. He was unable to continue absorbing the power of the stars. Ha ha ha, I know you can absorb the power of the stars, so I'll let you absorb as much as you want. Continue, see if I'll be worried. Ji Wuxiang said proudly, as if he had already expected Tang Zheng to do this. Tang Zheng became very passive. He had no way to absorb the power of the stars, but the sky was still constantly replenishing the power of the stars. The storm was getting bigger and bigger, and it was spinning faster and faster. Tang Zheng was in the middle of it, and he could already feel the terrifying power of the storm. Even if I can't absorb it, don't I still have the swallowing heaven technique? The heavenly realm is another world. I'll let you absorb as much power of the stars as you have. Tang Zheng's eyes turned, and he stretched out his left hand. A black hole appeared in his palm, and it kept growing bigger. Then, it flew out of his hand and floated in the air. Immediately, all the power of the stars in the world converged towards the black hole at an incomparable speed. It was not at the speed that Tang Zheng could absorb by himself. This speed was even faster than the power of the stars falling from the sky. The consumption was greater than the replenishment, and the power of the stars was decreasing bit by bit. Ji Wuxiang's smile froze. He didn't expect the situation to change so quickly, and the slap to his face so timely. Before he could react, the balance had changed. The yin and yang fish once again closed in on each other bit by bit. The terrifying pressure acted on his body, and he felt like his waist was about to be crushed. Close! Tang Zheng looked at this scene, and his heart was set. He roared loudly, and the yin and yang fish's speed suddenly increased, and it quickly closed. Boom! The storm was squeezed into the yin and yang fish. Ji Wuxiang hurriedly retreated at the last moment, and dodged this attack. It was like heaven and earth were merging, and the pressure was unimaginable. Therefore, the storm disappeared as if it had never appeared, and the yin and yang fish began to spin in the sky. However, bang! A loud explosion burst out from the yin and yang fish. The yin and yang fish completely exploded, turning into countless rays of light that scattered across the sky. Obviously, the power of the storm was too strong, and the yin and yang fish could not be suppressed. In the end, the two forces collided and exploded, and both died, vanishing into thin air. Ji Wuxiang retreated far away. His face was pale and he did not look good. From afar, he looked at Tang Zheng proudly standing in the sky. The thousands of feelings in his heart were indescribable. Tang Zheng's mind was shaken. He had won this attack, but the consumption was huge. There was no more spiritual energy in this world. If it was anyone else, even if they had Tang Zheng's cultivation, after this battle, they would be powerless and would be doomed. However, Tang Zheng was different. He could absorb the power of the stars, so he did not have to worry about this problem. In a few breaths, he recovered and was eager to try again. In the explosion, the black hole was also affected and disappeared. However, Tang Zheng's harvest was not small. There was already a large amount of power of the stars in the heaven realm. If he relied on his own strength to absorb the power of the stars from the 9 heavens, he would definitely not be able to do this, nor would he be able to do it so quickly. On the contrary, Ji Wuxiang had helped him a lot. Ji Wuxiang was not clear about the matters of the heaven realm, but he knew that the black hole was the heaven swallowing technique. He was very fond of it. Wasn't the heaven swallowing technique useless? Back then, even the people of the demon race were not willing to cultivate it. Why was it that in Tang Zheng's hands, it could actually produce such a huge power? Of course, he was not clear about the reason. Other than Tang Zheng, no one else knew. Tang Zheng looked at Ji Wuxiang from afar. Although the heavenly chess had changed, and he could not use the rules and loopholes of the heavenly chess to counterattack and dodge, even if he faced it head-on, he could still withstand it. Ji Wuxiang, what other moves do you have? Use them all. Tang Zheng said as he approached. Ji Wuxiang's expression kept changing. He gritted his teeth and said, "Do you think it will be so easy to win? You think too simply." After pausing for a moment, he took a deep breath. Like a muffled thunder, he roared, "Kill him!" Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Figures rose from the ground one after another. They were all warriors. They were densely packed like locusts, covering the sky and covering the sun. Tang Zheng was very curious as to where Ji Wuxiang had found so many martial artists that he could not kill them all. The warriors flew between Tang Zheng and Ji Wuxiang, forming a human wall, blocking Tang Zheng's path. Chapter 1558. The four symbols and the Azura had both turned into the height of an ordinary person. They did not look as scary as before, but their auras were completely different from the martial warriors in front of them. To read this book, please go to $cotton _flower_sugar small talk web. Tang Zheng pointed at the densely packed martial warriors and said indifferently, "I'll leave them to the two of you." "Master, don't worry. I won't let them hinder you," the four symbols said solemnly. The Shura did not say anything at all. He grinned, but no matter how one looked at it, his smile was sinister, causing one's hair to stand on end. Shwa. When the Azura blade appeared, the Azura did not even need Tang Zheng's instructions and rushed out first. Although most of his evil aura had been purified by the Ksitigarbha scripture, he was still born of evil aura, so there was still an evil aura hidden in the depths of his heart. Now that he was released, he couldn't wait to start a massacre in all directions and fight to his heart's content. Wang. The Azura blade started to tremble, continuously glowing, as if it was cheering as if it was about to drink blood. The four symbols was not willing to fall behind. With a leap, they pounced into the midst of the martial warriors. Ping ping pang. The sky was filled with weapons, but the four symbols acted as if they did not see them. They allowed the weapons to hit them, but all of them returned empty-handed, not even breaking their skin. The original body of the four symbols was a divine-level stone, which was not the slightest bit inferior to Tang Zheng's chaotic Vajra spell when it was cultivated to the extreme. So how could they be afraid of these weapons? No matter how sharp they were, they would only suffer a loss. The Azura glanced at the four symbols, as if he was aware of the competition. The Azura blade in his hand danced even faster, leaving no gaps. Wherever it passed, the martial warriors would die. The Azura blade was filled with Yin Qi. Once the Yin Qi entered the body, it would cause fatal injuries. Some of these martial warriors did not seem to have died immediately, but what awaited them was an even more painful process. Although the Azura and the four symbols could not absorb the power of the stars to continuously replenish their power, with their strength, they could definitely hold on for a long time. The attacks of these martial warriors were not as ferocious as those of Ji Wuxiang, which could consume too much of their power. Tang Zheng no longer cared about the fierce battle, and directly walked through the crowd. Seeing this, the martial warriors all rushed over, but before they could get close to Tang Zheng, they were all killed by the four symbols and Azura. It was as if Tang Zheng had entered an uninhabited land as he easily passed through the human wall. His eyes suddenly lit up as the space around him became spacious. However, Ji Wuxiang had already disappeared. Tang Zheng frowned. Did Ji Wuxiang escape? That was not his style. This was Ji Wuxiang's last bargaining chip. If he escaped like this, then once Tang Zheng destroyed this place, it would be very difficult for him to have a chance to make a comeback. Therefore, Ji Wuxiang would definitely fight with all his might, even at the risk of sacrificing his own life. Gradually, Tang Zheng's gaze fell on the towering Mount Buzhou in the distance. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Ji Wuxiang had escaped to Mount Buzhou? No matter what, he would not allow Ji Wuxiang to escape like this. Therefore, he chased after him. Mount Buzhou did not seem to have changed much. Pure white snow covered it, and it was still as tall as before. There was no concealing array at the top of the mountain. At a glance, it seemed to be connected to the heavens. What is Ji Wuxiang's intention for escaping to this place? Tang Zheng did not think that Ji Wuxiang was escaping randomly. He definitely had a motive. No matter what the other party's motive was, he could only go up the mountain first. Stepping on the somersault cloud, he quickly rose into the sky. There seemed to be no trace of martial warriors on Mount Buzhou. In fact, there was not even a shadow of a person. Tang Zheng looked along the way. Other than white snow, there was only white snow. Ji Wuxiang, where exactly are you hiding? Tang Zheng's eyes were like those of a hawk. He did not miss a single detail. The battle in the distance was getting more and more intense. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The white snow on Mount Buzhou shook incessantly and fell with a crash. It was as though an avalanche was about to happen. Whoosh! The white snow on a cliff really fell. Then it caused the white snow below to change rapidly like a rolling snowball. Then an avalanche came. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Layers of white snow rolled rapidly. Mount Buzhou seemed to be shaking more violently. Back then, Tang Zheng mystique used to move mountains, and moved Mount Buzhou a distance away to avoid the danger of Mount Buzhou collapsing. Moreover, Mount Buzhou was a sacred mountain. It had a guardian spirit. The guardian spirit had once given Tang Zheng god power to repel the dragon slayer. Therefore, when he did not see Ji Wuxiang, he tried to communicate with the guardian spirit of Mount Buzhou. It was the guardian spirit of this mountain. It knew everything on the mountain like the back of its hand. It definitely knew where Ji Wuxiang was hiding. However, there was no response at all. It was as if Mount Buzhou was a dead object. How can this be? Back then, when Mount Buzhou's foundation was damaged, the guardian spirit could communicate with me, and even gave me god power. Why is it that now that Mount Buzhou is undamaged, the guardian spirit has no reaction at all? Tang Zheng was shocked. He looked around but did not find any clues. Ji Wuxiang. It must be his doing. What did he do to Mount Buzhou to make the guardian spirit of Mount Buzhou disappear? Tang Zheng's heart gradually sank. He also became cautious. Whoosh! Suddenly, a huge rock flew over from nowhere and smashed straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng quickly dodged. The huge rock landed on the ground at the foot of the mountain, smashing a hole the size of a football field. Hiss! He sucked in a cold breath. Where did this attack come from? He actually did not find any clues. Moreover, this attack was so strong that it shocked him greatly. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. More than 10 huge rocks flew over from above. They were like meteorites from outer space. As they rubbed against the air, sparks flew. The huge rocks came unexpectedly. The somersault cloud quickly dodged while Tang Zheng wielded the hidden sword. The sword light danced and split a few huge rocks. However, his palms were sweating. The huge vibration was too strong. The huge rocks came from the mountain. Could it be that Ji Wuxiang is really hiding at the peak? Tang Zheng finally saw the clues and shouted, "Somersault cloud, fly up!" Whoosh! The somersault cloud became extremely agile. It quickly dodged and gradually flew up the mountain peak. Finally, he saw his target, Ji Wuxiang. He was really standing at the peak of the mountain, looking extremely carefree. He looked at Tang Zheng with satisfaction. It was as if he was not afraid of him at all. He had also forgotten about his failure just now. Ji Wuxiang, you really are here. Now you have no way out. Let's see how you can escape. Tang Zheng said with a murderous look. Ji Wuxiang laughed loudly. Tang Zheng, you really think you can kill me? You overestimate yourself and underestimate me. Humph. What other skills do you have? Take them all out. I want to see what other tricks you have. Tang Zheng said disdainfully. The heavenly chess was Ji Wuxiang's trump card. However, Tang Zheng could not guess what other tricks Ji Wuxiang could play with the heavenly chess. You want to see my trump card? Then I'll show it to you. As soon as Ji Wuxiang's voice faded away, a rumbling sound was heard. Mount Buzhou began to tremble. The pure white snow completely fell off, revealing the dark and hard rocks underneath. To download the latest TXT ebook, please click to read this book on mobile, to comment. Chapter 1559. The pure white snow on Mount Buzhou slid down. It was as if Mount Buzhou had taken off its outer layer, revealing its true appearance. The entire mountain was made up of pitch-black rocks of strange shapes. The rocks were either ferocious, strange, or heavy. Rumble. Mount Buzhou was still shaking. Ji Wuxiang stood at the top of the mountain, high and mighty, looking insufferably arrogant. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He seemed to have realized something strange. The guardian spirit of Mount Buzhou had lost contact. Could it be related to Ji Wuxiang? The commotion of Mount Buzhou was too great. It was probably related to Ji Wuxiang. Tang Zheng, it's not just about whether you can withstand the attack of Mount Buzhou. Ji Wuxiang asked proudly. As soon as his voice fell, a deafening sound came from Mount Buzhou. Then Mount Buzhou rose from the ground. Mount Buzhou quickly became taller. The pitch-black rocks moved and turned into a stone giant in an instant. This was a real giant, standing between the heavens and the earth. His head seemed to really touch the blue dome of heaven. Ji Wuxiang stood on its head like a god looking down on the world. Tang Zheng looked very weak in front of this giant. He was like an ant. At this moment, Tang Zheng was an ant in Ji Wuxiang's eyes. An ant that he could crush at will. Ji Wuxiang was fearless. With Mount Buzhou as his last resort, did he still need to be afraid of Tang Zheng? The answer was of course no. Tang Zheng's heart was filled with shock as he finally understood why Ji Wuxiang was so fearless. Looking at the indomitable giant, his heart couldn't calm down for a long time, and even his breathing became hurried. Mount Buzhou had fallen into Ji Wuxiang's control. This was one of the important reasons why he had deliberately set up the celestial chess in the 100,000 mountains. He had set his eyes on Mount Buzhou. Tang Zheng, what do you think of my reliance? Ji Wuxiang boasted proudly. Tang Zheng's expression darkened. The somersault cloud quickly rose to the same height as Ji Wuxiang. Ji Wuxiang, Mount Buzhou is a divine mountain. Do you think you can control it so easily? Haha, of course I know it's a divine mountain. I've looked up countless information and found out that Mount Buzhou was a mountain peak left behind when the world was created. Its magic is unimaginable. But so what? It's still controlled by my celestial chess. Now it's become my tool. Haha. Ji Wuxiang laughed maniacally. He had the right to be so arrogant. The celestial chess he had created was simply too miraculous. During this time, he set up the celestial chess around Mount Buzhou. Dianan and the 100,000 mountains became a huge chessboard. In the end, the mighty power of the stars fell on Mount Buzhou. It constantly suppressed the divinity of Mount Buzhou. Mount Buzhou's divinity was suppressed, and its guardian spirit fell silent. Mount Buzhou was completely controlled by the power of the stars and fell into Ji Wuxiang's hands. He didn't expect that his improved celestial chess was still not Tang Zheng's match. He had no choice but to use Mount Buzhou at this critical moment. He believed that if he had more time, he would be able to control Mount Buzhou better and not leave any flaws. However, things didn't go as he planned. He had no choice but to use Mount Buzhou. Dai Tang Zheng. Ji Wuxiang roared. Mount Buzhou moved. The huge foot made of rocks suddenly lifted and kicked at Tang Zheng. A vast and mighty power surged out. Tang Zheng immediately recognized that this was the fusion of the god power of the Buzhou mountain and the power of the stars. The power was extremely terrifying. Sure enough, he felt as if he had sunk into the sea. The air around him had undergone an earth-shattering change, and his body actually showed signs of being imprisoned. You want to defeat me like this? Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows. Xuanzang burst out with a bright light and wrapped him up in an instant. A giant sword gradually appeared. It crossed the sky as if it could pierce through the dome of heaven. The giant sword was too big. It was the biggest sword Tang Zheng had ever used. It was hundreds of meters long, and was completely covered by the sword light. The sun in the sky was covered by the sword light. The people fighting in the distance were all affected. They subconsciously blocked with their hands. The sword light was like small sharp swords. If they didn't block it, they would be doomed. Ah! Suddenly, a few screams sounded. A few cultivators fell from the sky and were crushed to pieces. They were injured by the sword light. They were thousands of meters away, but they couldn't escape. It was clear how powerful the sword light was. The air near the sword light was completely fragmented. The atmosphere was chaotic, as if a storm was about to arise. Hum. The sound of the sword rang through the sky. Then, the sword light moved and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Such a huge sword light naturally wouldn't disappear into thin air. Instead, it flew out at an extremely fast speed. It fell from the sky and slashed at the giant's leg. Tang Zheng didn't show any mercy. In such an earth-shattering battle, showing mercy would be handing one's life to the enemy. He wouldn't do such a stupid thing. He activated all the unrefined power of the stars in his body and covered the hidden sword. Then he and the sword became one and intertwined to form a giant sword that crossed the sky. Whoosh! It was cut in half. A long black strip appeared in the void. It seemed that the space door was about to be cut open by the sword. Boom! The hidden sword slashed at the giant's leg. In an instant, the giant shook violently. A terrifying force rebounded from his leg. The hidden sword rose to the sky. The giant's leg fell back to the ground. Boom! It was earth-shattering. The ground cracked inch by inch under the giant's foot. It became riddled with holes. A huge pit formed under its foot. Whoosh! However, Mount Buzhou was far more powerful than that. So in the next second, Mount Buzhou's fist came again. It was like a meteorite falling from the sky and smashed at the hidden sword. Clang! The hidden sword shook violently and flew to the ground. It went straight into the ground. And there was a person lying on the ground. Tang Zheng. Mount Buzhou's attack broke his state of being one with the hidden sword. Ji Wuxiang laughed arrogantly. Tang Zheng, stand up and fight. The show has just begun. Why did you fall? Tang Zheng climbed up with his hands on the ground. He didn't even look up at Ji Wuxiang. Instead, he stretched out his 5 fingers. Boom! 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 The mountain shook as if there was an earthquake. Mount Buzhou couldn't stand still. It swayed as if it was swaying in the wind. Ji Wuxiang hurriedly stabilized his mind and body as he stared at Tang Zheng. The earth and rocks on the ground flew up into the air bit by bit. In an instant, the sky and earth turned gray. The ground under Tang Zheng's feet cracked. A ray of light penetrated through the crack. It was extremely sharp. The light flashed and flew into Tang Zheng's hand. Chapter 1560. The Ksitigarbha Sutra began to circulate on its own as a layer of golden light appeared on his body. The golden light gradually covered his entire body and intertwined into a golden kasaya. Ji Wuxiang was stunned. He didn't know about the Ksitigarbha Sutra, but he could clearly feel the change in Tang Zheng's aura. He seemed to have become stronger. Tang Zheng silently chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, and Sanskrit chants descended from the sky. These Sanskrit chants didn't come from Tang Zheng's mouth, but reverberated in the natural world. It was as if heaven and earth had some kind of mysterious resonance with Tang Zheng, resulting in this change. What is this? Ji Wuxiang's expression turned cold as he asked loudly. Tang Zheng rarely used the Ksitigarbha Sutra in the human world, because the Ksitigarbha Sutra was more used to intimidate and convert ghosts. However, there was no doubt that the Ksitigarbha Sutra also had a very strong offensive ability. Otherwise, how could the Dizong of Goguryeo rely on the Ksitigarbha Sutra to rule the ghost world? A lotus flower appeared with every step, and this lotus flower didn't disappear. Wherever Tang Zheng passed, the lotus flowers connected, forming a staircase that extended all the way to mid-air. The Ksitigarbha Sutra. Tang Zheng said lightly. What the hell is that? Ji Wuxiang didn't know much about the ghost world, so naturally he didn't know the power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. I don't care what sutra you are. Under the divine power of Mount Buzhou, everything is in vain, only ashes can be scattered. Ji Wuxiang coldly snorted. Mount Buzhou once again raised its giant foot, and stepped towards Tang Zheng, who was in mid-air. Hua! With a flash of golden light, the golden kasaya on Tang Zheng's body flew out, growing bigger and bigger until it covered the sky, flying towards the giant foot. The giant foot seemed to be stepping on clouds as it ruthlessly stepped on the kasaya. However, the kasaya didn't break. It only trembled a few times before it stabilized in mid-air. Tang Zheng's every step was like a lotus flower as he soared into the sky. With the sword in his hand, he looked like a handsome tree in the wind. He pinched a sword sign and the sword of hidden darkness once again flew out, directly slashing towards Ji Wuxiang, who was on top of the giant's head. Ji Wuxiang's expression suddenly changed as he cried out in surprise. The golden Kasaya had actually blocked the attack of Mount Buzhou, allowing Tang Zheng to have the energy to attack him. Sword come! Ji Wuxiang roared as a ray of light descended from the 9 heavens. This was the power of countless stars converging together to form a sword. But this sword was like a real thing, held in Ji Wuxiang's hand, and then chopped down from the sky, coincidentally colliding with the rapidly approaching Xuanzang sword. Clang! The two swords clashed, and only this sound was left in the world. Many people who were slightly weaker were directly knocked unconscious and fell down. Tang Zheng's mind shook, but he immediately calmed down. Without a doubt, Ji Wuxiang's use of the power of the stars had reached the peak, surpassing Tang Zheng's. Tang Zheng knew that he couldn't do this, but he had the sword of hidden darkness, which was not inferior to Ji Wuxiang's sword in the slightest. Clang! Ding dang! The two swords went back and forth in midair, fighting happily. Their auras fluctuated, and the wind and clouds changed color. Unknowingly, a black cloud had gathered in the sky, and the world darkened. Crack! A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, and a heavy downpour poured down. The rain kept hitting Mount Buzhou, but it couldn't get close to Ji Wuxiang and Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng had already flown to the peak of Mount Buzhou, but the divine power of Mount Buzhou kept him at the door. He couldn't step on the peak, and could only hover in midair. A huge golden lotus spun incessantly beneath his feet, lifting him up. Ha ha, Tang Zheng, what can you do to me? Eat my sword. Seeing that Tang Zheng was already in front of him, Ji Wuxiang laughed wildly, and the sword in his hand flew out, slashing straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng waved his hand, and the sword of hidden darkness flew back to his hand, and then he slashed down with all his might. This time, the sword of hidden darkness was connected to Tang Zheng, and its power was obviously stronger. When it landed on the sword of light, the sword of light was immediately shattered into pieces, and disappeared without a trace. Tang Zheng took advantage of the victory, and prepared to climb to the peak of Mount Buzhou to give Ji Wuxiang a fatal blow. However, Ji Wuxiang's fingers moved, and with a single point of his finger, the wind and clouds changed, and the rain on the mountain peak stopped. The air also froze, and everything became strange. In the next second, a surge of divine power shot out. Bang! Tang Zheng blocked with his sword, but he couldn't completely block the divine power, and flew down like a kite with a broken string. Boom! With a loud sound, the golden Kasaya was affected by Tang Zheng, and couldn't withstand it. It was ruthlessly stomped into the ground by Mount Buzhou's huge foot, and exploded into pieces. Ha ha! Ji Wuxiang's wild laughter echoed between heaven and earth, and the rain continued to fall. Tang Zheng landed on the ground, his entire body drenched by the rain. He allowed the rain to splash on his face, and the surging power in his body made it impossible for him to immediately suppress it. He only felt that even breathing was a burning pain. Mount Buzhou's divine power is indeed extraordinary. He had once received the blessing of divine power, and could actually force the dragon slayer to retreat, so he had a deep understanding of the power of divine power. At this moment, the divine power fell into Ji Wuxiang's hands, and he really couldn't kill Ji Wuxiang. But he had no way out, and if he didn't take this opportunity to kill Ji Wuxiang, then when he counterattacked, he would be even stronger, and how could he deal with it? I'll deal with him. Suddenly, an angry roar sounded, and a cloud of black gas flew over from afar, eerie and terrifying. When it arrived in front of Mount Buzhou, the black gas transformed into Azura. Roar! Azura roared into the sky, and the billowing Yin energy spread in all directions. The ground under his feet was immediately infiltrated by the Yin energy, and turned pitch black. The Yin energy wreaked havoc, and wherever it passed, the grass withered, and not a single blade of grass grew. Azura's body also expanded, and in a short while he grew to the height of Mount Buzhou, holding the Azura saber in his hand, looking ferocious and terrifying. Seeing how powerful Ji Wuxiang was, the warriors left the four symbols to deal with, and Azura completely broke out of his ferocious nature and came to help Tang Zheng. Azura, be careful, Tang Zheng warned loudly. Azura didn't say a word and raised the Azura saber to attack. Clang! The Azura saber fell on Mount Buzhou, but there were no sparks. It was like a clay ox entering the sea, and there wasn't much effect. Huh? Azura was stunned, as if he didn't expect that his Azura saber couldn't hurt Mount Buzhou. Seeing this, Ji Wuxiang laughed complacently. Mount Buzhou is a divine mountain, protected by divine power. It's not something you can hurt as you wish, wishful thinking. Azura coldly snorted, and his eyes locked onto Ji Wuxiang. He flew up, and this time, the Azura saber slashed directly at Ji Wuxiang. Clang! The divine power rebounded, and the Azura saber flew out of Azura's hand. This was a rare occurrence, and the Azura saber and Azura were one, but it still flew out. Tang Zheng, I'll deal with your follower first. Ji Wuxiang roared, and Mount Buzhou attacked Azura with both hands and feet. Azura gave up on the Azura saber, and with his tall body, he tangled with Mount Buzhou. Chapter 1561. The battle between Azura and Mount Buzhou was earth-shattering. Mortals couldn't get close to it. With a stomp, the ground cracked. Bottomless fissures spread across the ground. With a punch, the rainwater seemed to be pulled apart by a string. The rainwater in the sky couldn't fall. The pits and ditches on the ground were filled with rainwater, turning into lakes and rivers. The mountains and rivers changed. The landscape changed drastically. Tang Zheng and Ji Wuxiang watched the battle with surging emotions. Even the martial artists in the distance who saw this scene were so frightened that they lost their minds and fell from the sky. The four divisions, on the other hand, were unaffected. Their fists landed on the bodies of the martial artists, killing them instantly. Finally, the warriors were either dead or injured. There was no one left in the sky. The four symbols hurriedly rushed towards Mount Buzhou. With every step he took, his body grew taller and taller. As he grew taller, the soil on the ground converged towards him. When he walked to the front of Mount Buzhou, he also turned into an indomitable giant. Ji Wuxiang's pupils shrank when he saw this. He was shocked that Tang Zheng had two such powerful helpers. Originally, he was full of confidence, but now his face became gloomy. Mount Buzhou, kill them. Boom. Mount Buzhou's attack became even more ferocious. His fist penetrated Azura's chest. However, Azura sneered. You want to kill me just like that? Boom. Azura's fist also landed on Mount Buzhou. Mount Buzhou shook rapidly. Ji Wuxiang almost lost his footing. Azura was formed by Yin Qi and could change at will. If this attack didn't hurt his foundation. However, the serious look in Tang Zheng's eyes became more and more intense. Because he saw Azura's condition. The world was completely covered by the power of the stars. There was no Yin Qi or spiritual Qi of heaven and earth. After a tough battle, Azura was exhausted and couldn't continue. As expected, Mount Buzhou only shook a few times. The storm-like fists passed through layers of rain and landed on Azura. Boom. The Azura couldn't resist and fell to the ground with a loud bang. Streams of Yin energy splashed out as his body rapidly shrank. Does that mean I can kill you now? Ji Wuxiang said fiercely. Whoosh. One of Mount Buzhou's legs left the ground and landed heavily on the Azura. Boom. With a loud noise, the four elephants rushed over and struck Mount Buzhou's waist with a punch. Mount Buzhou quickly moved backward and slid out a long ditch on the ground. The rain became heavier and filled up the ditch in an instant, turning it into a river. Another one who doesn't fear death. I'll deal with you first. Ji Wuxiang said fiercely. Mount Buzhou ran up, and with a boom, the earth trembled. In the blink of an eye, Mount Buzhou's enormous body rushed in front of the four symbols. Bang bang bang. Every punch landed on flesh, and the sound of impact was like thunder. As the two sides fought, the raindrops flew in all directions. When they landed on the ground, they were like cannonballs, creating craters. The place had turned into a mess. Azura, come back. Tang Zheng saw that the Azura's Yin Qi was already dissipating, and immediately stopped him from rushing forward. I can still fight, the Azura said stubbornly. No, come back, Tang Zheng ordered. With a thought, the Azura returned to Sumeru world. Tang Zheng soared into the sky, once again raising his hidden profound sword. He fought side by side with the four symbols, attacking Mount Buzhou together. The sky darkened. This battle lasted from day to night. When the sky brightened again, it lasted from night to day. There seemed to be no end to it. The rain in the sky continued to fall. The prehistoric heavenly tomb had already been completely destroyed. In fact, the range of their battle had already expanded to other regions of the 10,000 huge mountains. Countless mountain peaks were broken in half. Countless rivers changed their course as a result. Countless large trees disappeared. The few of them did not seem to be tired at all. Ji Wuxiang and Tang Zheng could absorb the power of the stars to replenish their strength. Mount Buzhou and the four symbols did not need to absorb the power of the stars. When their feet landed on the ground, all the power in the earth vein would gather towards them. The rocks and soil outside the four symbols' body were constantly flying under the fists. Not long after, they dissipated, revealing his body. But very quickly, other rocks and soil continued to gather, replenishing his consumption. As for his main body, even in such an intense battle, he was not injured. Similarly, Mount Buzhou's main body was not injured either. Those black rocks possessed divine power, and could not be harmed at all. Tang Zheng gradually saw through the clues. Mount Buzhou and the four symbols were all pitch black, and their composition seemed to be very similar. They were all rocks that possessed some kind of divine power. Ji Wuxiang also noticed this, and his gaze aggressively lingered on the four symbols. The four symbols were created from a piece of rock left over from the creation of this world. Could it be that they had some kind of connection or origin with Mount Buzhou? Tang Zheng thought of this point, but Ji Wuxiang did not know the details. He was so anxious that he almost stomped his feet when he saw that Mount Buzhou, whom he had placed his hopes on, could not destroy the four symbols. Mount Buzhou, you possess divine power. How can you only have this little ability? Ji Wuxiang said fiercely. Tang Zheng's eyes gradually lit up. Four symbols. Aren't you one with the Tianxia mountain range? Merge with Mount Buzhou and awaken its guardian spirit. Understood. The four symbols seemed to have been stripped of his bones. Seeing Mount Buzhou's fist coming at him, he simply gave up on resisting. The moment the fist struck his chest, he wrapped his hands around Mount Buzhou's fist. A mysterious power surged out, and the air seemed to have stopped. Mount Buzhou and the four symbols were both fixed in place, their bodies releasing a black light at the same time. Ji Wuxiang saw this abnormal scene, and immediately realized that the situation was bad. He shouted, Mount Buzhou, destroy him for me. Mount Buzhou turned a deaf ear to him. The black light on his body became more and more intense, rushing into the sky. This part of the sky seemed to have turned black. Even the rain could not penetrate this layer of black light. Bang! For some reason, Ji Wuxiang actually flew out from the top of Mount Buzhou's head. How can this be? Ji Wuxiang couldn't help but cry out in alarm in midair. Tang Zheng's eyes trembled when he saw this scene. He realized that Ji Wuxiang had been sent flying by Mount Buzhou's divine power. Mount Buzhou's divine power was actually fighting against Ji Wuxiang. What did this mean? The four symbols had taken effect. Tang Zheng slapped his head. He had only just realized this after fighting for so long. He really couldn't see Mount Tai. He impatiently asked, for symbols, how is it? The four symbols didn't answer him. His body was shrinking, and the mountain rocks and soil that had been sucked over fell off one by one, revealing his true body. Mount Buzhou's fist seemed to have become one with his body. That fist was actually melting bit by bit. To read a novel, please visit. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.